Chapter 723. Recently, the city of immortals has become deserted. In the restaurant, a wine guest held a wine pot and gently shook it. His eyes looked out through the window, and the corner of his mouth evoked a playful smile. Across the table, a Taoist in coarse clothes coldly said, "Deserted? There are more and more people in the city of immortals." After a pause he said, "Not only people but also evil spirits." "What kind of evil spirits can hide from your eyes?" The wine guest sneered and took another sip of wine. "Even if some evil sects come in, they're probably evil spirits and monsters. These days I haven't seen them carry out terrorist attacks at all. It's really boring." The Taoist across the table frowned. "You called me here just to complain about these boring things?" "Haha, of course not. As the supervisor of Xingjing sect, how could I delay your time for boring things? This time I invited you here to ask something. Of course it's not for nothing. Today's dishes and wine on the table are on me." The Taoist frowned and looked at the table. There were 3 empty wine pots, all of which were eaten by the wine guest. A plate of peanuts was also eaten by the wine guest, and he didn't taste any of them. At the same time, there was only a pot of rough tea and a half-full teacup in front of him. Did he spend so much effort to call him over just to invite him to drink such a cup of free tea? He was indeed the famous bitch in 9 regions, the record holder of the Wuxia League's lower limit. "Wang Wu, if you have something to say, just say it." However, Wang Lu is the chief planner of the organizing committee, so he has a rich source of information. "What do you want to know?" "Just ask him, why do you have to go far?" The wine guest across the table was Wang Wu. "Supervisor, you think too highly of him. When it comes to intelligence, who can compare with the 9 regions supervisor of Xingjing sect? The famous former #1 king pill in 9 regions, Taoist master Kong Zhang." The Taoist in coarse clothes invited by Wang Wu was Kong Zhang of Xingjing sect, an unknown but influential Taoist master of King Pill. Had the former #1 King Pill of the 9 regions, this title is really ear-piercing. As Kong Zhang spoke, his gaze pierced forward like a sword. However, this seemingly corporeal gaze seemed to sink into a void of chaos, unable to exert any force. Kong Zhang chuckled and withdrew his gaze. This simple exchange had indeed revealed an insurmountable gap in strength. There was indeed an insurmountable gap between the current #1 King Pill of the 9 states and the former #1 King Pill. "What do you want to ask? Speak." Wang Wu put down the wine pot and pondered for a moment. "I want to know, in your opinion, what important things have happened in the city of immortals these days?" Kong Zhang couldn't help but laugh. "What a good question. The city of immortals was so big that there were countless things that happened every day. The competition in Immortal 1 area alone was the focus of attention of tens of thousands of people, which was worth writing about. However, Wang Wu probably didn't call him over to ask about those things that everyone knew. In fact, she had Wang Lu as her disciple, so it was not difficult for her to know any information, but it was difficult to find useful information among the thousands of information. An average person wouldn't be able to sift through the information and organize it well. And this was the irreplaceable place of the 9 regions supervisor of Xingjing sect. After thinking about it, Kong Zhang said, "In my opinion, there are a few things worth mentioning in the city of immortals in the past few days. First, Wang Lu left the city of immortals several times and went deep into the whirlpool of stars to meet with Dixian. The initial speculation is that he met with Tetragon." Before he finished speaking, Wang Wu nodded and confirmed the news. Yes, he went to see Tetragon. It seems that he wanted to use the beauty trick to seduce her, but he failed shamefully. Kong Zhang pondered for a moment and decided to filter out Wang Wu's nonsense. The only thing that could be confirmed was that Wang Lu met with Tetragon. In addition, in the past few days, there are more unclean things in the city of immortals. Wang Wu immediately became interested and asked, "What is it?" Kong Zhang shook his head and said, "At present I can't find any clues. The other party's skill is quite high and I'm just intuitively judging it." Since the 9 regions supervisor can't find any clues, could it be someone from the demon sect? No, I remember the stench of the demon sect very clearly. But now I can only say that these are unclean things, but I can't tell what they are at all. After a pause, Kong Zhang said, "I'm not even sure if these unclean things really exist." Well, in the current situation of the city of immortals, it's not surprising to provoke anyone. 9 regions is vast and boundless. Maybe there are hidden powerful people who came to watch the fun. Kong Zhang nodded and said, "That's also an explanation, but I can't feel at ease if I can't figure out their identity." "Very well, is there anything else?" "The third thing is Xu Si, the owner of Qingfeng Enterprise, has been asking to see Luo Xiao for several days in a row, wanting to cooperate with him, but Luo Xiao closed the door and refused to see him. Wang Wu was stunned and said, "What is this? You even care about this kind of folk gossip? I'm familiar with Luo Xiao, but who is Xu Si?" A new rising star in the business world. Kong Zhang patiently explained the origin of Xu Si to Wang Wu. A very interesting person. After listening to his story, Wang Wu was also curious and said, "How is this interesting?" The number of businessmen floating in the sea of business is like the grains of sand in the Ganges River. Every day there are people who rise and every day there are people who jump into the river. This kid's ability to try his luck is good, but is it worth it for you to talk about it alone? For ordinary cultivators, a business that controlled huge resources in the immortal cultivation world might have considerable weight. However, in the eyes of the supervisor of Shengjing sect, even if a businessman was 10 times stronger than Xu Si, he was still just a businessman. Xu Si himself is not worth mentioning. What's really interesting is the person behind him, a blank person. A blank person? Kong Zhang said, "I can find out his appearance, his cultivation base, and his every move in the City of Immortals. But before entering the City of Immortals, his record is blank. And in this world there is no real blank person. Even if it's your sex Wang Lu, at least I know that he was born in Wang family village and has a very wonderful inheritance." Speaking to this, Kong Zhang once again looked at Wang Wu with his sharp eyes. Unfortunately, he still didn't get any response. He continued, "But I can't find out the origin of the person behind Xu Si." Wang Wu shook the wine pot and said, "With the means of the supervisor, if you really want to know something, there will always be a way. Unfortunately, when I noticed him, he was no longer a target that I could make a move on at will. With the cover of Qingfeng Enterprise, I can't make a move on him at will. I have observed him. Although his origin is unpredictable, he is not an enemy that needs to be dealt with by fair means or foul." "I see. So, speaking of which, what do you think is wrong with this guy instructing Xu Si to see Luo Xiao?" "I don't know." Kong Zhang said bluntly, "I can't see the problem, but I can't figure out the reason why he deliberately went to see Luo Xiao. The reason given by Qingfeng Enterprise is to buy a horse's bones with 1,000 gold, but I don't believe it." Wang Wu didn't understand. "And then? Even if you can't figure it out, it's not a big deal in the end." Kong Zhang said seriously, "Things that I can't figure out have the value of taking seriously." "Very well, you're really confident. Is there anything else important after that?" Kong Zhang thought for a moment and said, "The fourth thing is that you called me here." Wang Wu smiled and said, "Don't worry, I don't like you, so you don't have to worry about your chastity." Kong Zhang said, "But there must be a reason. What did you find?" "Sure enough, I said that if I look for you inexplicably, I would definitely be suspected. Fan Air, that big-breasted brainless girl, wanted me to try. She said that you might be naturally stupid." Wang Wu sighed and said, "In short, there is a girl in my family with a particularly keen intuition. She said that something might happen in the City of Immortals recently. I asked a few people but they all felt puzzled, so I had to ask you." Kong Zhang pondered for a moment and said, "You said Fan Air. Is she one of those women who suddenly appeared in the City of Immortals together with Yu Jiao of Song and the others? I just want to ask you, what is their origin?" "I've checked." "Oh, just take it as a woman's secret." Wang Wu said, "I guarantee that they are all good girls. Each of them is a pure and kind girl." Kong Zhang couldn't say a word for a long time. The guarantee made by the number one bitch in 9 regions was too convincing. "Very well, I can put down the matter of these people first. But if there is any new situation on your side, remember to contact me in time. At least we can confirm each other." Kong Zhang didn't ask much, but he had already trusted the intuition of Fan Air. Because this was the guarantee of the current number 1 king pill in 9 regions. Wang Wu thought for a moment and nodded. "Okay." Thereupon, Kong Zhang picked up the teacup and drank the last half cup of tea. "Finally, I also have a question for you. With your character, you rarely take the initiative to participate in these things. You usually avoid them. Is there any reason why you have to do it this time? Hey, this is a big thing related to the safety of the people in the City of Immortals. Why do I have to do it as a last resort?" Wang Wu was somewhat dissatisfied with the other party's attitude. Kong Zhang was a serious person. When he heard this, he honestly replied, "Because even if you do this kind of private work, no one will give you money." Wang Wu finally had nothing to say. After a long silence, she stood up. "Inspector, you still don't know me?" After leaving the restaurant, Wang Wu smiled gently, looked up at the sky and whispered to herself, "Even if no one gives me money, don't tell me I won't ask for it myself." Wang Lu, that bitch, has so much money in his hand, but he doesn't take the initiative to share it with me. At the same time, on the other side of the City of Immortals, The big boss of Qing Feng Trading Company, who was young but had a net worth of billions, boss Xu Si, who could rival a country, was striding heroically on the road to a hidden residence. Looking at his expression, it was as if he was going to the execution ground. Alas, the ancient sages have a beautiful story of 3 visits to the thatched cottage, but I have visited 10 times in a row in 3 days. Even after people have moved, I still pester them. I'm afraid I will be called a pervert in the future. While talking to himself, Xu Si knocked on the door of a small courtyard and was ready to welcome another round of closed door. This was the new residence that Luo Xiao moved to yesterday. Previously he was harassed by Xu Si every day in the Four Elements sect. Last night he moved at night. Unfortunately, he was still seen by Xu Si's men. To be precise, this behavior was indeed no different from that of a pervert. However, unexpectedly this time the door opened. Luo Xiao appeared behind the door with a somewhat helpless and somewhat amused face. "You're really persistent?" Xu Si resisted the excitement and joy in his heart and cupped his hands. However, before he could speak, he saw Luo Xiao waving his hand, "Come in and talk." Xu Si quickly followed him. Along the way he followed Luo Xiao to the inner room. Along the way he looked around and saw that the courtyard was simple and dusty. It seemed that the owner of this place had no intention of living here for a long time. It was more like a refuge. Thinking of this, Xu Si couldn't help but smile bitterly. "Master Luo Xiao, this is really not what I want, but for the sake of dead face I have no choice. I will definitely compensate you for your mental loss in the future." While thinking, Xu Si followed Luo Xiao into the house. However, as soon as he stepped into the door, he saw a person that shocked him. A person who looked exactly like him. Then he heard the last sentence of his life. "It doesn't take any effort to get here." Chapter 724. Can this grand competition still work? Lose is just losing. Is the Wanxian League a ***********? In the evening of another day, after the end of the day's competition, the resentment and hostility in the arena of Immortal One area almost turned into a substance, like a dark cloud that shrouded the arena. There was a saying in the world of mortals that the people's condemnation was so powerful that it could affect reality. If it were cultivators whose power of will was thousands of times more than that of mortals, perhaps even true immortals who descended to the world of mortals would tremble under the condemnation of thousands of people. The current union of 10,000 immortals was under such pressure. It had been 20 days since the start of the absurd competition between Tetragon and the Wanxian League. Tetragon miraculously maintained the record of total victory. Correspondingly, the Wanxian League naturally maintained the record of total defeat. Since the establishment of the Wanxian League, there had never been such a shameful and embarrassing record. This grand competition was really the first in the immortal cultivation world in 9 regions. Alas, calm down. After all, the competition hasn't reached the last moment yet. Fortunately, Senior Gem Emperor arrogantly changed the condition to the union of 10,000 immortals winning the first match, which finally left us with a little chance. What's there to be happy about? Even if we win by a fluke, do you have the face to admit that we won? There are tens of thousands of sects and hundreds of millions of cultivators in the Wanxian League, yet they can't even do anything to one person from the other side. I think all the high-level people should commit suicide to apologize. Well, I don't think it's necessary to think that extreme. After all, the other party is Dixian, who cultivated before the age of chaos. Her conditions are unique, which we can't compare with. Although it seems that Tetragon is the only one, she represents the entire Dixian camp, and Dixian can be said to be the representative of the glorious era before the age of chaos. Enough, you can tell this kind of deceptive reason to yourself. Damn it, I donated money and goods to them in the past, I'll just consider it as feeding the dog. Are you done yet? I've been listening to you farting for the past 2 hours. If you're that capable, why don't you go on stage and compete with Tetragon yourself? Didn't she say that anyone was welcome to challenge her? If you look down on the Wanxian League organizing committee, you can do it yourself. What does that have to do with you? Are you a dog of the Wanxian League? You are so loyal to your master, do you think Wang Lu will give you 2 more bones? Damn it, are you asking for a beating? Seeing that chaos was about to break out, 3 golden-armored warriors descended from the sky and suppressed a few cultivators who were rubbing their fists with invisible pressure. However, similar scenes could be seen everywhere in the City of Immortals. Although the golden-armored men were loyal to their duty, their number was limited, and there were always places where they could not stop it. This caused the order in the City of Immortals to become increasingly chaotic. However, compared with the worst expectation, the current situation should be quite good. There was no large-scale, organized riot. Although the management of the organizing committee of the grand competition of the Union of 10,000 Immortals was questioned, it was not challenged. After dispelling the hostility, people still rationally believed that Wang Lu should still have the cards that could turn the tables. Of course, all of this was under the deliberate guidance of the organizing committee. As early as when Tetragon proposed to change the format of the competition, Wang Lu led the organizing committee to design a full set of public relations programs to control public opinion and guide people's hearts, and to ease and stabilize the situation as much as possible. Now it seemed that the effect of public opinion work was good. The most important point was that, although it was difficult for people to accept the successive defeats of the Wanxian League, they could reluctantly accept the successive victories of Tetragon. In short, people had a good impression of Tetragon. This was, of course, the role of the public opinion tool. The cultivators of the Wanxian League had no chance to personally contact Tetragon. To understand her, in addition to witnessing her invincible heroic and domineering appearance on the field, they could only listen to other people. As the most familiar figure in the City of Immortals in the past month, the story of Tetragon had been widely circulated. It was said that she was omnipotent. In ancient times she was one of the top figures who once made thousands of immortals bow their heads. It was said that she was kind-hearted, noble, and admirable. It was also said that she was a national beauty. Under the purple atmosphere of the Emperor, her figure and appearance were flawless. These stories were, of course, fictitious. It was true that Tetragon was omnipotent, but the one who really made thousands of immortals bow their heads was someone else. As for being kind-hearted and noble, that was even more of a joke. Although Senior Gem Emperor had the breadth of mind and boldness of an emperor, she was too decisive and ruthless in her actions. She had the appearance of a tyrant, which had nothing to do with benevolence. She also disdained the name of benevolence. As for being a national beauty, it was a matter of opinion. For some people, the appearance of a budding girl was an irresistible temptation, but for more people, it was still an unripe sour fruit. The organizing committee used these fictitious stories to appease people as much as possible. But at the same time, even in the eyes of the organizing committee itself, this was tantamount to drinking poison to quench thirst. The truth would always be exposed. Tetragon was not a cultivator under the Wanxian League, so she had no obligation to cooperate with their fictitious propaganda. Once the truth was exposed, just thinking about it made people restless. However, the person who personally directed all of this seemed to have no pressure at all during this period of time. As the chief planner of the organizing committee, Wang Lu basically handed over the daily work to the secretarial team headed by Hai Yunfan. However, there was only one thing that he had to do every day: skipping work to fish, and his whereabouts were mysterious. Of course, Wang Lu also had a good reason. He was on a business trip due to an important matter. As for where this business trip went, even the chief secretary Hai Yunfan was vague. As for what the important thing was, no one knew. Of course, Wang Lu did not seriously conceal his whereabouts. There were countless capable people in this new city, so even if Wang Lu wanted to hide it, he could not. Therefore, there were still some people who knew his whereabouts. In the whirlpool of stars, in the depths of the group of immortal tombs. However, only a few people knew that Wang Lu went deep into the group of immortal tombs to visit an unexpected person. Tetragon. Of course, people did not expect this candidate. Because Tetragon had to play at least 3 to 4 matches a day in the City of Immortals, and the duration of the matches was getting longer and longer. Out of the 24 hours in a day, at least 16 hours were spent in the arena. And Wang Lu's whereabouts were uncertain. Most of them were at the same time. In theory, it was impossible for them to meet each other. In fact, there was, of course, a problem. As Wang Lu initially guessed, although Tetragon was invincible in the arena, she was actually absent-minded. Because the Tetragon in the arena was just her avatar. Tetragon's real body had always been in the whirlpool of stars. On this point, if Wang Lu had not personally gone to the whirlpool of stars and seen Tetragon's real body, even he could not be completely convinced that Tetragon really had the courage to use an avatar to fight against the Wanxian League. However, after meeting her, Wang Lu realized that it was not that Tetragon was bold, but that she had no choice. She had more important things to do than to suppress the Wanxian League in the City of Immortals with her own strength. The whirlpool of stars to kill the rebels. When Wang Lu ventured deep into the whirlpool of stars for the first time, he happened to encounter Tetragon fighting against Gisaurus. The girl fought against 3 enemies alone, and the Emperor Purple Chi in her hands was ever-changing and had infinite magical abilities. In the end, she managed to severely injure 3 raging world dragons with the strength of immortal beasts, and forced them to flee in panic. After defeating Gisaurus, Tetragon naturally found Wang Lu and questioned his purpose. I'm here to deepen our understanding and friendship. Of course, this excuse could not fool him. Seeing that Tetragon's eyes flickered and seemed to have a murderous intention, Wang Lu had to turn over a card. Xuan Xian and Shen Mo are your people, right? After this sentence, Tetragon's face changed slightly. She reached out and stirred the river of stars, causing countless bright stars to shatter and destroy, and then drew out a dead silent area to surround the two of them. Then she looked at Wang Lu solemnly for a while. How do you know? Shen Mo told you? She shouldn't have the guts. Wang Lu said, I don't need anyone to tell me. I can guess it. You used their magical ability in the competition, so of course I know they are your people. Tetragon frowned slightly and said, You know I can borrow other people's magical ability? But just based on this? This reason is enough. It's impossible to borrow magical ability without restrictions. Otherwise, you would not have lost to them that year if you directly borrowed the magical ability of the fallen immortals. According to my speculation, the biggest possibility is that the original owner of the magical ability needs to be willing to let you borrow it. The whole world belongs to the king, but the people in the king's land have to be obedient people to pay taxes. If they are traitors, you can't get any benefits from them. Tetragon could not help but sneer and said, Whimsical. But it's not unreasonable. You guessed it right, my Emperor Purple Chi does have such a restriction. However, based on this, I'm afraid you can't conclude that Shen Mo and Lu Biechen are my people, right? Wang Lu said, Your performance in the competition is too arrogant. Using Xuan Xian's technique to win against Tian Luan, using Yin and Yang division to win against 16 Knights Villa. I'm not blind, of course I can see it clearly. Ah, you're sharp. Tetragon declined to comment. Then what did you find? Wang Lu said, Since I guessed that those two people are your people, I naturally want to know why you are so ruthless to your own people? Tetragon lightly said, Maybe it's because I'm a tyrant? Can we talk about something nutritious? Wang Lu sighed and said, Can we respect each other's IQ? Ah. Tetragon laughed loudly and looked very happy. Tell me, what else do you know? Wang Lu said, After thinking about it, I think the most likely thing is that there is a traitor among you. You let the two of them use the trick of injuring themselves to gain the confidence of others. Tetragon's smile suddenly disappeared, and his cold eyes swept over like a sharp blade. This is not something that can be joked about. So even you have to deal with it carefully for fear of making the slightest mistake. You let Shen Mo, Lu Biechen, and perhaps others use the trick of injuring themselves to gain the confidence of others and expel them together with the one you suspect. You constantly put pressure on them, forcing them to work together during this period, and then expose the real traitor. Tetragon nodded. Your guess is somewhat reasonable. Wang Lu smiled slightly and said, Of course, if there's a deeper speculation, perhaps you don't even trust Shen Mo and Lu Biechen. Otherwise, you don't need to expose your cards so quickly in the City of Immortals. Although you are used to covering up your true temperament with the attitude of a tyrant, I think you are at least a meticulous person and would not be so careless in doing things. And if it's intentional, then I'm afraid two things can be inferred from this. Then, in the increasingly serious eyes of Tetragon, Wang Lu stretched out two fingers. First, you have doubts about Shen Mo and Lu Biechen, so you blatantly used their magical abilities in the competition, not hesitating to expose their identities. Second, you deliberately did it for others to see, but that person is not me because it makes no sense to show it to me. In other words, you think there are traitors in the City of Immortals. Hearing this, Tetragon's face finally completely changed. Chapter 725. Who else did you say those words to? Of course not to others at will. What if I'm killed by you? Tetragon chuckled and said, Smart. But, for a smart person like you to come to me today and show all your cards, what do you want? Wang Lu said, It can be said that it's curiosity, or it can be said that I'm not willing to be a spectator. Try to stand in my point of view. Even the king of Dixian has to go through a lot of trouble and even beat around the bush to deal with the enemy. If I turn a blind eye to it, wouldn't that be the road to death? Tetragon was silent for a moment and then said, You guessed it right, the opponent is very powerful, even I can't deal with it at will. But because of this, you should act according to your ability and avoid getting yourself involved in the whirlpool. I'm not kidding when I said that I would protect you. Wang Lu said, A monarch does not joke, of course I know that. But, frankly speaking, I think you can't even protect yourself, so how can you protect us? Moreover, even though our overall cultivation base is not as good as that of our predecessors, we also have irreplaceable advantages, so we don't necessarily need your protection. Don't look disapproving. Do you really think that you're so strong that you can win in the City of Immortals? If I didn't throw the game, you would have already lost. Ah. Tetragon laughed again. Wang Lu, your joke is funny. But if you're serious, I'd like to hear how you throw the game. Wang Lu lightly said, the competition has been going on for more than 20 days, and I've always been a spectator. Isn't that the biggest throw the game? Do you want to say that if you personally make a move, you can beat me? Wang Lu nodded and said, that's right. If I personally make a move, you would have been defeated. Tetragon was silent for a while but still couldn't help but laugh. Are you serious? Do you really want to win against me, a cultivator with King Pill? If it was your master, I would be a little more serious, but if it's just you... Alright, since you're so confident, then come and try. Before he finished speaking, Wang Lu had already stepped forward and made his move. The primal chaos heaven-splitting sword Qi went straight for his face. Zhong Xingming's heaven-splitting divine sword is indeed powerful, but without a cultivation above the soul formation stage, the divine sword is just a formless form. How dare you use this sword to fight me? As she spoke, Senior Gem Emperor stretched out a finger and pressed her fingertip against Rouge Tears. Her delicate fingertip bent the immortal sword Rouge Tears slightly. The body of the sword twisted and groaned in pain, as if it was about to break. One sword, one finger, the difference in strength was like the difference between clouds and mud. At this moment, Tetragon did not use his true strength as a Dixian. She restrained her power within the level of King Pill, separated a trace of her ocean-like immortal spirit into a core, and then fought against Wang Lu with the same level of King Pill. There was no level limit in the competition in the City of Immortals. However, at this time, Tetragon strictly suppressed his own strength and did not use the power of Dixian. If they wanted to fight, they would fight according to the rules that were favorable to them. If they won, they would be convinced and have nothing to say. This was not only the generosity of the Emperor, but also a trace of preferential treatment that Tetragon gave to Wang Lu. Wang Lu unceremoniously accepted Tetragon's preferential treatment. After the first sword strike failed, he made another sword strike. Unexpectedly, he held two swords in his hands. This sword strike was very fast and very hidden. The sword light was completely covered in the shadow of Rouge Tears, but its power was not much inferior to that of the immortal sword. However, as if he had foreseen it, Tetragon's other hand just happened to be in front of the sneak attack sword, so that it could not move. Two fingers easily stopped Wang Lu's two thunder-like sword strikes. Wang Lu's face gradually turned red, and his whole body's true yuan boiled like lava as he continued to output power. However, Tetragon looked indifferent and at ease. It was simply a crushing disparity. The strength of Tetragon had far surpassed that of any other Dixian. As a contestant of the grand competition, after a long period of training and strengthening, Wang Lu's strength had more than doubled compared to before the grand competition. He was also at the peak of King Pill, but the peak was different. Now he had the strength to compete with the general Dixian in King Pill. However, in front of Tetragon, everything seemed to return to the starting point. Trying to compete with me with brute force? Wang Lu, you're too irrational. I'm very disappointed. With that, Tetragon raised his eyes and the virtual King Pill with the immortal spirit energy spun wildly, releasing countless golden threads, which spread out from her body and weaved into a huge net that wrapped her up tightly, like a cocoon. Calm down, I have considerable expectations for you, Tetragon said and sighed slightly, and a trace of disappointment flashed through her eyes. She indeed had high hopes for Wang Lu. Although the strength of this young cultivator was not strong, his resourcefulness was ever-changing, which was often refreshing. Tetragon had long decided that after he unified 9 regions, he must give Wang Lu an important position so that he could display his talent. That would be a more substantial position than the chief planner of the organizing committee. At the same time, she would also try her best to help Wang Lu improve his cultivation base. With the means of Dixian, coupled with Wang Lu's amazing void spirit root, his strength would certainly advance by leaps and bounds. If she used the secret treasure in the depths of the group of immortal tombs, it would only take him 30 years at most, or even a few years at least, to let him enter the threshold of Dixian. However, now it seemed that her expectations for him were too high. Although Wang Lu was talented, he could not avoid some common problems of young people, hot-headed and gambler's mentality. Could it be that he couldn't think of the gap in strength between the two sides? However, he still wishfully chose to use force. Did he really think that he could have a good chance of winning? Although, the sharpness of his sword was indeed beyond her expectation. As Tetragon thought about it, she raised her right hand. On the tip of her jade-like index finger, there was a drop of blood that was particularly eye-catching. Unfortunately, after all, he was still too tender. Tetragon shook his head, put these thoughts out of his mind, and prepared to continue to deal with the matter of Gisaurus. However, at this time, there was a sudden cracking sound behind him. Tetragon's complexion changed dramatically. "Wang Lu, are you crazy?" The giant white cocoon was formed by Tetragon's immortal spirit virtual king pill. It was like an extension of her body and had a very keen sense of touch. Wang Lu was trapped in the cocoon, and his every move was under the control of Tetragon. Therefore, Tetragon immediately discovered what Wang Lu was doing. He blew up the king pill. After more than 30 years of cultivation, the king pill that carried Wang Lu's entire immortal cultivation path exploded in the young man's indifferent smile. The king pill, which was stronger and more indestructible than any metal, was torn apart by the powerful explosive force. At this moment, even the knowledgeable Tetragon couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Wang Lu surprised her again by making an absolutely unexpected choice. He blew up the king pill. Was it necessary? This wasn't a battle to the death. Was it necessary to disregard his own future and even his own life for a mere victory? Even if he used the power of the king pill to escape, and even won this match, was it really a victory? He couldn't even calculate the basic gains and losses. How could she rest assured to hand over the more important responsibility to him? In that instant, Tetragon thought a lot, and at the same time she did one thing. She dispelled the cocoon so that the power of Wang Lu blowing up the king pill could be released. Otherwise, the violent power would be sealed in a small space. Even if Wang Lu could survive the backlash of blowing up the king pill, he would still be torn apart by the violent power. Although Tetragon was disappointed with Wang Lu's performance, she wouldn't sit by and watch him die. However, the moment Tetragon dispelled the cocoon, she suddenly widened her eyes and looked at the cocoon in disbelief. A purple sword energy was stabbing straight at her. It was hard to describe the brilliance of this sword energy with words. Although in essence, the sword energy was just a manifestation of a swordsman's true essence, this sword energy was like a living person, containing a trace of incredible and magical power. And it was under the control of this magical power that the purple sword energy easily bypassed the 3 lines of defense that Tetragon had set up in front of her and instantly stabbed at her. The next moment, Tetragon felt a slight chill on the center of her forehead. The sword energy had already touched her lightly. Of course, the sword energy didn't continue to penetrate deeper. Tetragon's physical body was still at the Dixian level, and it was almost indestructible. But this sword energy had touched a vital point, and it clearly and unmistakably showed one thing. She had lost. Tetragon was silent. She silently looked at the fragments of the cocoon, and Wang Lu's figure slowly appeared. And the purple sword energy curved and returned to his body. After a long time, Tetragon sighed and said, "The king pill is broken, and the nascent soul is out. This is the sword of the nascent soul. You actually chose this time to break through. You actually managed to break through at this time." The king pill was broken and the nascent soul was out. This was a hurdle that countless cultivators in the world had experienced. Cultivators used the king pill to fuse with the great Tao, and then used their primordial spirit to fuse with the king pill, refining the great Tao in the pill into a living creature. From then on, there would be even more magical powers. This was the path from the king pill to the nascent soul. It was also the path that Tetragon had walked on before. Therefore, Tetragon understood very well that if a nascent soul cultivator took advantage of the moment when the king pill was broken and the vital essence overflowed, triggering a qualitative change, and used a sublimated sword energy, the power of that sword energy could instantly reach the level of a high-grade nascent soul. However, this sword energy basically only existed in theory. After all, in reality, who would fight someone while the king pill was in the process of breaking through to the nascent soul? The king pill to the nascent soul was a major obstacle on the path of cultivation. The slightest mistake could lead to the destruction of the pill and the death of the cultivator. There had already been countless examples of the king pill being broken, but the nascent soul not coming out. Therefore, Tetragon never expected that Wang Lu would hide his trump card here. The sudden sublimation of the nascent soul sword energy was simply a heaven-defying existence in a battle at the king pill level. The many lines of defense that Tetragon had set up in front of him were designed with the king pill level Wang Lu as the standard to ensure that Wang Lu would not be able to break through even if he was twice as strong. However, Tetragon did not expect that Wang Lu would be able to break through. In the face of the nascent soul sword energy, these lines of defense were vulnerable and were pierced in an instant. There is indeed no chance of winning against you with brute force, so I have to use my brain. Wang Lu smiled and said, "Now, are you willing to admit that you are not so omnipotent?" Chapter 726. A lot of things before it happened, no matter how one thought about it, it seemed impossible. However, when it actually happened, when one looked at it from another perspective, one would feel that it was nothing strange. King Pill was broken, Yuanying came out. Wasn't this normal for Wang Lu? He had been at the peak of King Pill for some time. For ordinary cultivators, this period of time was very short, far from enough to complete the accumulation of breaking through the bottleneck. However, for Wang Lu, how could there be so many troublesome bottlenecks with Void Spirit Root? What's more, Wang Lu was the lead disciple of Lingjian School and also served as a senior leader of the organizing committee. He had so many resources in his hands that many large immortal cultivation sects felt sincere envy. And with such a huge amount of resources, could it not pile up a Taoist master of Yuanying stage? Wang Lu could have reached Yuanying stage a long time ago. The reason why he stayed at the peak of King Pill was nothing more than to cope with the grand competition. Under the special competition system, he who was at the peak of King Pill was more useful than a low-level Yuanying. Now that the grand competition was over, Wang Lu no longer needed to suppress his cultivation base. Thus the King Pill was broken and Yuanying came out. Everything was logical. And Wang Lu also took this opportunity to plot against Tetragon. It's really an eye-opener for me, Tetragon also sincerely exclaimed. Although, strictly speaking, she could not be regarded as losing. On the contrary, Wang Lu's Yuanying sword in the King Pill level competition was the real problem. However, was Tetragon a person who fussed over every little thing? Wang Lu did not mention that she suppressed her cultivation base in the competition. It was she who took the initiative to restrain herself. And it was Wang Lu's own ability to break through in the competition. In particular, it was commendable that she, who had the magical ability of Swan Xian, did not feel any abnormality before the competition. Therefore, when the purple sword Qi touched the center of her forehead, Tetragon was willing to admit defeat. The emperor could afford to lose and let it go. Wang Lu smiled. It's just a small trick. It's not worth mentioning. But I think this sword strike is enough to prove one thing. You are not as omniscient and omnipotent as you think. There are blind spots in your thinking, so in the face of the fallen immortals, you will need help from others. Tetragon was silent for a while, obviously thinking about this. After a while, she looked at Wang Lu and asked, "Can I trust you?" Wang Lu said, "At this time, there's no need to ask such a meaningless question, right?" "Ah, well said. However, you better think about it carefully. My trust in you is very heavy." Wang Lu took a deep breath. "It's fine." "Good, your courage is commendable." Tetragon smiled and nodded. He closed his eyes and thought for a long time. When he spoke again, his words caused Wang Lu's expression to turn solemn and his brow to furrow. "There are indeed traitors in the Dixian camp, but I can't lock the target at all. In fact, banishing Shen Mo and the others and blowing up my cards in the City of Immortals is just my attempt to muddy the water and lure the snake out of the hole." "In other words, you're just blindly guessing?" Wang Lu shook his head. The situation was much worse than he initially expected. "What about the number?" Tetragon said, "I'm not sure. Maybe it's one, maybe it's more." "If you can't be sure of anything, how can you be sure that there's really a traitor?" These are his last words to me. I don't think they're wrong. Wang Lu's ears moved. Could it be that the him in Tetragon's words was the former leader of Dixian, the legendary Dixian who fought on the front line against the fallen immortals? To be honest, he was really a legendary existence. Because until now, Wang Lu still didn't know what the real name of the leader was. Every time he heard Shen Mo and the others mention him, he would call him boss in awe, and he didn't even dare to mention his real name at will. But now, when he heard Tetragon talk about that person, although there was no humility in his tone, it was full of respect and even vaguely put him above himself. This was really strange. As a dignified emperor, he should be the only one in the world, but Tetragon was willing to put himself under others? While thinking about it, Wang Lu took over Tetragon's topic and said, "The last words left 10,000 years ago. And you haven't found the traitor yet?" Tetragon said, "He finally made a judgment before he fell asleep. At that time it was too late. I thought I would keep this secret in the dark forever, but fortunately I woke up and had a chance to save it." The more Wang Lu listened, the more he felt suspicious, especially the first sentence, "before he fell asleep." Didn't he fall in the battle of the fallen immortals? Tetragon looked at Wang Lu, and his clear eyes made Wang Lu suddenly realize that the water was probably deeper than he thought. In short, it might be speculated that the leader of Dixian was not actually killed in the decisive battle. His death was either a deliberate rumor, or a misunderstanding by Shen Mo and the others. In short, the leader actually escaped into the group of immortal tombs with them and fell into a permanent sleep. It was just that before he fell asleep he made the judgment that there was a traitor in the team. Unfortunately, Tetragon didn't have time to find the real culprit until 10,000 years later when he accidentally resuscitation. However, there was a problem. Why didn't he tell anyone else about this but Tetragon? With all due respect, this question is very important, so I must confirm it. What is the relationship between you and him? Tetragon gently smiled and said, Sun Buping is my Taoist companion. Wang Lu was silent for a while and felt that this answer did not seem so unexpected, especially considering the slightly strange attitude of Shen Mo when talking about the relationship between Tetragon and that person. In fact, he should have already guessed some clues. Only this answer could perfectly explain all the characteristics of Tetragon. Moreover, the name Sun Buping. When he carefully chewed it, he felt that it had endless charm. It was just 3 words, but it made Wang Lu in a trance see such a situation. He was the leader of Dixian, the most amazing cultivator in that era. Although he stayed in 9 regions, he had the absolute strength of a true immortal. However, this true immortal, who was not inferior to the earth immortal, never chose to ascend to the immortal world. Instead, he stayed in 9 regions. In order to protect all living beings, he waved his sword and declared war on a group of fallen true immortals. This was, of course, a war with no chance of winning. Any one of the opponents was the most powerful existence in 9 regions. The ascension that hundreds of millions of cultivators in 9 regions diligently pursued was just the starting point of true immortal. The 2 sides were simply the existence of different worlds. However, Sun Buping still chose to stand on the side of 9 regions. Because of the injustice, he drew his sword to follow his heart. Even if there were thorns everywhere, he would still move forward bravely. Tetragon actually found a good husband. After gently shaking his head, Wang Lu came back to his senses and asked, Did you inherit his legacy? Upon hearing this, Tetragon sneered and said, Why do I need to inherit anyone's legacy? It's just that before he went to sleep, he entrusted the burden on his shoulders to me. As a couple, I will do one last thing for him. When this matter is over, I will no longer have anything to do with Sun Buping. Wang Lu was startled and said, You're quite open-minded. The dead are gone. Although I was very happy when I was with Sun Buping, since he is dead, I will never fall into his shadow. Tetragon said with a smile, Speaking of this, shouldn't you give me an answer about the marriage? Wang Lu suddenly coughed and said, Well, I'm afraid I still need to think about it. Think about it? Tetragon asked, Do you still have room to think about it now? After knowing so many secrets, you should think about your own safety, right? Wang Lu inwardly exclaimed, What the F***ck? Is this a naked threat? In fact, he had expected that knowing too much would not end well. However, the secrets that Tetragon said just now were really hard to resist listening to. As a result, the evils that he brought upon himself were the hardest to bear. Gossiping was good for a moment and the Dixian was lying on the bed. Although Tetragon was indeed a great person, and Wang Lu quite agreed with him and even had a deep impression of him. But he was not willing to marry her. In a flash, Wang Lu racked his brain to think of a way to refuse this absurd marriage. Well, I don't care about this, but you should consider it seriously. If a dignified earthly immortal were to form a marriage alliance with a mere golden core realm. Oh no, a nascent soul realm cultivator like me, isn't it too absurd? The gap between Dixian and Yuanying is bigger than the gap between a human and a dog. If you and I marry, it's tantamount to sexual intercourse. I'm afraid it would not be tolerated by the heaven and earth. Tetragon disagreed. I've seen many examples of cultivators and spirit beasts combining, so what if it's sexual intercourse? Don't you have 2 spirit dogs on Spirit Sword Mountain? And more than 20 years ago, when you were attracted by the mountain spirit in the Grand Cloud Mountain, did you ever consider the difference between sexual intercourse and sexual intercourse? What the hell, you even dug out that kind of private matter? Tetragon said, Shen Mo and the others have always attached great importance to you. They have carried out quite in-depth excavation of you, and their evaluation of you is very high. I was skeptical about this, but now I believe it. You are indeed not a person who completely belongs to 9 regions. Wang Lu's heart thumped. Not belonging to 9 regions? Do you want to send me to the Western continent? Western continent? I'm afraid you're from a place farther away than that, Tetragon said and then turned serious. Everyone has their own secret and I will not delve into it. I'm willing to believe you and I hope you can shoulder my trust. Senior Tetragon, you're a good person, but Tetragon could not help but laugh. Enough, don't think I don't know the meaning of the good person card. Resuscitation, I have observed the current 9 regions for a long time, and I also know your popular culture. However, since you resist it in your heart, I won't force it. But you'd better think about it carefully so that you won't regret it in the future. Regret it in the future? The connotation of this sentence is really rich. In short, I will think about it. Now let's get back to the point. What else do you know about the traitor hidden in the Dixian team? Let's compare and analyze it together to see if we can lock him more clearly. Tetragon nodded and said, at present, there are 5 people with the highest suspicion: Black, Xian Mo, Bai Zhe, Luo Shui, and Bai Shaoxing. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu frowned. The first 3 were all old acquaintances, while Luo Shui was proficient in all kinds of arts and had won many times in the grand competition with a crushing advantage, which made him famous. But what kind of sacred being was Bai Shaoxing? I borrowed the Dawnstar Lord's magical power to win in your conduct test theory competition, Li Yunmu said. Tetragon lightly explained, in terms of knowledge he is comparable to your Wanxian League's heavenly strategy. Comparable to heavenly strategy? He's indeed a Dixian level, but he was very low-key before. Tetragon said, so I also suspect him, but relatively speaking he is the least likely. At present, the person I suspect the most is still Black. Chapter 727. Black was a very strange person. No matter from which point of view, this person was very suspicious. However, until Tetragon's resuscitation, he was the uncrowned king of the Dixian camp. His power and prestige were much greater than that of Sun Buping's deputy Bai Zhe. And whether the Dixian agreed with his style of doing things or not, they all had considerable trust in him. And the reason was that Sun Buping trusted Black, so the others did not suspect him. This was especially evident in Xian Mo. Of course, this was very unreasonable. This kind of trust was simply blind faith and blind obedience. Even if Sun Buping had a great reputation, he should not love the house and its crow to this extent. What's more, according to Tetragon, Sun Buping realized at the last moment that he had trusted the wrong person. There was a traitor in the Dixian team, but he never discovered it. Could that person be Black? Now it seemed that it was very likely. Tetragon said, but I don't have conclusive evidence. Now that I think about it, many of the things that Black has done can only be said to be suspicious, but not enough to convict him. Wang Lu asked, is it necessary to be so particular? Since it is suspicious, just kill it first. Have you seen any leading cadres do things in accordance with the laws and regulations? As an emperor, you should have the awareness that the emperor breaks the law and does not care about the people. Tetragon said in a deep voice, if that's the case, I have to kill at least 1/3 of the Dixian team. In that era there were too many suspicious people and things. How did you lead this team? Wang Lu was amazed. Leading a group of suspicious people to create a revolution? Isn't the construction of your team too sloppy? So Sun Buping is their leader, but I am not. He has the breadth of mind and courage to accept everything, but I don't have that interest. And it turns out that he is indeed wrong. Senior Gem Emperor bluntly commented on her former Dao companion, it's a pity that he left happily, but left me with a lot of trouble. I can't lock onto the target at all, so I can only muddy the waters first. At this point, Tetragon paused for a moment, and his expression became even more solemn. And now I'm very worried, whether there were any other changes before my resuscitation. Wang Lu asked, what do you mean by other changes? Before Sun Buping fell asleep, he told me that there was a traitor in Dixian. And after more than 10,000 years have passed, perhaps there will be more than one traitor. Wang Lu was slightly startled when he heard this, but he immediately understood. Because it was human nature to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. The so-called Dixian were just a group of powerful cultivators. There was still a qualitative gap between them and the real immortals who had ascended to the immortal world. Being the enemy of the fallen immortals was somewhat like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. When Sun Buping was alive, he was like a dazzling flag, which boosted the morale of the Dixian, and they were not discouraged despite repeated defeats. However, after the decisive defeat, the Dixian retreated to the Tomb of Immortals, and the Sun Buping was seriously injured and went into hiding. The morale of the Dixian could be imagined. Seeing that things couldn't be done, was everyone really willing to go into eternal sleep? More than 100 Dixian, did none of them think about surrendering? If they thought about it, wouldn't they put it into practice? Now that he thought about it, when the grand competition began, only about half of the more than 100 Dixian actually appeared on the field, while the rest seemed indifferent. Perhaps they were not indifferent to the grand competition, but they were no longer interested in the resistance against the fallen immortals. In such a situation, if the traitor hidden in the team had the intention to incite, it was not difficult to instigate more people to rebel. Thinking to this, Wang Lu was once again enlightened. So, You found a reason to banish several of the most prestigious people in the original camp? Tetragon said, yes, when I resuscitation the grand competition has been going on for half a year. I really can't judge what happened during this period, but I can at least prevent things from deteriorating further. Based on what I saw and heard when I resuscitation, those who have the power to incite are basically those few people. Driving them away and then establishing my own authority can at least deter the scene. That's really well-intentioned. Wang Lu sighed sincerely. Tetragon said, don't just sigh with emotion, the situation on your side is the same. The construction of the City of Immortals has made the distance between you and me closer than ever. In more than half a year, perhaps some of your people have been instigated to rebel. Wang Lu shrugged helplessly and said, they don't need to be instigated to rebel. There have never been a lack of capitulationists on our side. In the beginning, there were even unruly people who gathered to petition the Wanxian League to give up the struggle and surrender early for the sake of the people of the world. Damn it, they haven't even seen the face of the fallen immortal, but they're actually faster than dogs. Fortunately, the old Taoist he too is not confused. In time, he authorized me to suppress this group of evil spirits with an iron fist policy, so that the world can be peaceful. Tetragon shook his head and said, world peace? I'm afraid it's not that easy. Even the City of Immortals has been infiltrated. When my avatar competed in Immortal 1 area, I once smelled an unclean smell. Unfortunately, I can't accurately locate it, so it's inconvenient to make a move. An unclean smell? It's in line with what that guy Wang Wu said. Wang Lu pondered and said, so, I'm afraid something is going to happen in the near future. Severe pain. It tore the heart and split the lungs, penetrated deep into the bone marrow. Like a surging ocean rolling waves, it swallowed people in an instant, making them lose their reason and go mad. Under this inhuman torture, even death became a kind of relief. The boundless pain lasted for no one knew how long. Finally, the wind and waves subsided, and in the dark ocean, a little light of sanity emerged. Am I finally dead? The teenager pieced together the fragments of his reason and asked such a question in his heart. However, the next moment, a strong light suddenly lit up in front of him, which swept away the reverie in his mind. When he opened his eyes, he saw a very familiar scene. The spacious and gorgeous bedroom, the half-closed glass window, and the refreshing incense. This was his new home in the City of Immortals. Every bit of the home was arranged by him, which looked particularly familiar. I'm still alive? Was that a dream before? The teenager touched his head, feeling a lingering fear. Like I said, this City of Immortals is obviously peaceful. How could someone suddenly commit murder openly? Moreover, it was against a wealthy businessman like me? What's more, the other party was the successor disciple of the famous Four-Element Supreme. He had a promising future and there was no enmity between them. So, why would he take the risk of being arrested and deliberately kill him? However, just as the young man was gradually relieved, he suddenly realized something strange. In an instant, his hair stood on end. The teenager found that his body was out of control. At this time, he was sitting cross-legged on the bed, and a faint purple smoke came out of his 7 orifices, as if he was cultivating some strange method. The teenager was sure that he had never learned such a strange method. Moreover, he had just come back from the gates of hell, so he had no intention to cultivate at home. In the final analysis, he was not interested in immortal cultivation. In contrast, he was more willing to be a rich man and win status with wealth. If he had to cultivate, he would choose those who had a good appearance. But now, he couldn't help but spit out the purple smoke, his hands and feet danced, and he couldn't stop even if he wanted to. What's going on here? Why are my hands and feet not listening to me? In a panic, the teenager tried to use the inner vision method to see what was wrong with his body. However, the next moment he was shocked to find that his primordial spirit was gone. This was, of course, contrary to common sense. If a person's primordial spirit disappeared, it was basically equal to losing his soul, a dead end. Moreover, without primordial spirit, how could a person think? Since the resuscitation, the teenager's thinking had been running fast, and his thinking must have a place. Without primordial spirit, where could his thinking go? Now, what's the situation? Dead face, you, come and save me. The fear in the teenager's heart grew deeper and deeper. Vaguely, he realized that some things might not be a dream. He visited Luo Xiao, was led into the courtyard by him, and then saw an identical version of himself in the house, and then fell into darkness. When his consciousness was resuscitation, he experienced a painful torture. Now that he thought about it, this experience became more and more bizarre and completely confusing. However, the teenager, after all, had some experience in the City of Immortals. With the prosperity of his business, the more he came into contact with them, and gradually he had a good understanding of some strange methods. Therefore the teenager suddenly guessed something. Could it be that right now I'm actually a puppet controlled by someone? And a little of my consciousness is embellished on the puppet as a camouflage? If that's the case, doesn't that mean? The teenager's heart trembled with fear. The real me is dead and now I'm just a remnant soul? While thinking about it, his body suddenly stiffened involuntarily, and the faint purple smoke was quickly retracted into his body. The teenager knew that the puppet had received a new instruction and was ready to go. At the same time, there was a familiar sound of footsteps outside the house. Dead face? The teenager was startled, and then a deeper horror came. He roared in his heart. Dead face, run. Someone wants to ambush you. Run away. Unfortunately, his body was no longer in control. What came out of his mouth was the opposite of what he wanted to say. Dead face, I just encountered some trouble in my cultivation. My limbs are paralyzed, I urgently need help. The footsteps outside the house stopped. Immediately, the dead-faced man slowly walked over. Chapter 728. Dead-face never walked fast, but at this time his footsteps sounded so hurried to Wuxia. One step, one step. In the blink of an eye, Dead-face walked from the gate of the spacious courtyard to the door of his bedroom. And every step meant that he was closer to the abyss. Wuxia couldn't wait to explode a little bit of his soul to warn him not to come close. However, at this time he was completely powerless and could only watch everything happen. However, the footsteps of the dead man's face stopped at the door. The cold voice came in through the door, but it warmed Wuxia's heart. I asked you to visit Luoxiao to seek cooperation. Did you do it? The tone was as cold as ever, but Wuxia swore that he had never looked forward to Dead Face's cold treatment. Hurry up and leave after you lose your temper. Don't come in. But the puppet he possessed obviously wouldn't give up so easily. Luoxiao said that he would seriously consider it, so I came back in advance to celebrate. Who knew that my mood would be so agitated that my practice would go wrong? Dead Face, don't stand at the door to question me. Come in and help. The puppet's imitation was so perfect that Wuxia felt as if he could hear his other self speaking. Fortunately, Dead Face didn't let him down. What kind of practice are you practicing? Why are your limbs paralyzed and you can't move? The puppet replied, what else can it be? Of course it's the ice heart technique you taught me. Ice heart technique? Where did you know this name? Outside the room, Dead Face's voice became colder and colder. Even Wuxia's spirit began to tremble slightly. Yes, he had never practiced the ice heart technique. What Dead Face taught him was clearly the jade bone technique. However, Luoxiao designed this trap to kill him. Perhaps he had already investigated him thoroughly. How could he even make a mistake about what he practiced? So, who was wrong in the end? At the same time, after hearing this, the puppet's controller was slightly stunned and then explained, of course, I heard it from someone. You changed the name of the ice heart technique to jade bone technique. When I was practicing with my friends, they could see that it was the ice heart technique at a glance. The dead-faced man coldly interrupted outside the door, you have never liked to cultivate. How can you have any friends to compare skills with you? The puppet seemed to be angry. Dead Face, don't always expose me, okay? I've been exposed by the expert, okay? If you have the time to criticize me outside the door, why don't you come in and help me? If there are any side effects, I, as a disciple, will lose face for you. This tone was exactly the same as the real Wuxia. But Dead Face was apparently aware of something. He still stood outside the door and asked unhurriedly, which expert would care about such a trivial matter? It's Luoxiao. I got along well with him, and he even gave me pointers on my cultivation. I say, dead-faced man, why are you talking so much nonsense? Do you just want to see me suffer? Dead Face sneered outside the door, you have a good relationship with Luoxiao? He kept you outside the door for the past few days. What did you do to make him suddenly warm up to you? Can't sincerity move metal and stone? I am the head of Qing Feng Xing and I visit him every day like a dog. He was moved by my sincerity so he let me in. Dead Face, are you done yet? Ha 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 ha. Just as the puppet began to get angry, Dead Face suddenly laughed outside the door. At this time Wuxia heard Dead Face laugh for the first time. Before this he had always thought that Dead Face had no human feelings at all. However, after listening to this unrestrained laughter, he suddenly realized that under that dead-like face, there seemed to be a fiery passion. Luoxiao, I think you've had enough of this puppet show. You killed my disciple and stole his soul, but you dare to ambush me and set up a killing array in my house. Do you think I am a wooden puppet? While talking, a heat wave suddenly hit outside the house. like a volcanic eruption. The doors, windows, and walls melted in an instant, revealing a sea of fire in the courtyard. Deadface stepped on the flames and lived in the middle of the courtyard. Every pore on his body was gushing out a torrent of fire. His rough robe was burned by the flames, revealing a golden robe. His whole body was like a golden lotus bathed in fire, shining dazzlingly. This was the first time Xu Si saw him go all out. This power, he was afraid that it was not weaker than a Yuanying stage cultivator, and might even touch the edge of deity stage. Was this the true strength of Deadface? In the face of Luo Zhao's killing array, he was finally willing to show his true ability. For some reason, Xu Si had a faint trace of excitement and expectation in his heart. In his impression, Deadface had never really shown his true realm. When they met in the streets, he thought that Deadface was just a rogue cultivator wandering on the edge of the immortal cultivation world. It was already good that he had foundation establishment stage cultivation base. However, after reuniting in the City of Immortals, he brought him too many surprises. Therefore, in Xu Si's heart, he even unrealistically expected that Deadface could turn the tide and defeat Luo Xiao, and then save him. Although, the dead could not be resurrected and he was killed by Luo Xiao, leaving only a remnant of his soul, since he could still think and perceive this world, perhaps there was still hope for him to be resurrected. Even if he could only attach himself to a puppet and could not get a perfect body, he didn't care. As long as he could survive, he didn't care about anything. However, the next moment Xu Si's heart fell to the bottom, because he saw Luo Xiao. Luo Xiao was also in the sea of fire, and the raging flames were naturally extinguished when they were 3 feet away from him. Luo Xiao had a trace of contempt on his face as he sneered and said, "Isn't it good to be your wooden puppet? It's rare to build a stage for you, but you would rather waste this script. You really don't know how to live. Sheninzi, when you step into the courtyard, you are entering the land of death. Do you think you still have a chance to survive?" Sheninzi? Was this Deadface's real name? Sheninzi sneered and said, "Do you think that by using that rat to trick me into entering the door you'll win? Luo Xiao, you've become a lot more stupid after joining the new master. Who do you expect to come and save you? Your Qingfeng Trading Company, or the golden armored strongman of the City of Immortals? Or is it your destroyed green netherworld dojo? Unfortunately, in my array, not a trace of sound will leak out. It is exactly as the saying goes, no one will come to save you even if you break your throat. In today's situation, your only chance of survival is not to enter this door. Unfortunately, your eyesight is not so good that you can't see through the flesh puppet I created with my remnant soul." Xian Yinzi coldly snorted and no longer said anything. The fire surged, setting off waves of fire in the courtyard, as if it wanted to burn the sky and boil the sea. However, with the courtyard wall as the boundary, an invisible barrier forcibly blocked the boiling flames and restrained them in a narrow space of no more than 10 feet high. Although Xianinzi's fire waves were fierce, they were like a trapped beast in a cage. Luo Xiao had really spent a lot of effort for this killing trap. He himself was a top master in the King Pill realm, and obviously, there was a higher-level mastermind behind the scenes. This time, although Xianinzi's hidden strength was very powerful, he was still inevitably defeated. However, Luo Xiao clearly had the situation under control, but he was not in a hurry to kill. Instead, he wasted precious time talking to Xianinzi. "Xianinzi, in fact, I have 100 ways to let you die silently, but I deliberately came to you and set up this trap, because I have a question that I don't understand. I hope you can answer honestly. Why did you let your disciple die?" Hearing Luo Xiao mention himself, Xu Si was shocked. Luo Xiao said, "Although I don't know where I exposed my flaws, since you have seen through me, you should know that the smartest choice is to report the news to the elders of the Heavenly Sage Hall as soon as possible. You must not alert the enemy. But you just had to do the opposite. You made your disciple come to visit me again and again, forcing me to kill you and your disciple. What is your intention?" Hearing this question, Xu Si felt like he was hit by a heavy hammer. Yes, why did Deadman Face let him die? If he had seen through Luo Zhao's problem, he should have kept him as far away from Luo Xiao as possible. No, he did do this before. He ordered the Qingfeng business firm to stop all projects related to Luo Xiao early. He was puzzled about this. If he knew that Luo Xiao had a problem at that time, why did he force him to talk about cooperation with Luo Xiao a few days ago? Then, wasn't he sending him to his death? Luo Xiao said again, after thinking about it, "The only reasonable explanation is that you want to threaten me with this. So you didn't make a move yourself and sent your disciple as a chess piece to test me. You clearly told me that you already know my new identity. As for whether this pawn is dead or alive, of course you don't care. It's just that you probably didn't expect me to do it so quickly. I didn't hesitate to make a big fuss in the City of Immortals to kill you. The above is the most reasonable guess I can make, but to be on the safe side I'll give you a chance to speak. Xianxi, cherish this opportunity. Say something that can surprise me. I may spare your life. For Luo Xiao, who had the overall situation under control at this moment, he indeed had the capital to waste his words. He calmly watched Xianxi in the sea of fire, waiting for his answer. Xianxi's response was another sneer. Luo Xiao, your guess is only right on one point. That little mouse is indeed just a chess piece in my hand. However, I have never abandoned a chess piece in my hand. Hearing this answer, Luo Xiao's face was slightly gloomy. Moreover, you made a mistake in your judgment of this little mouse. He does not cultivate the ice heart technique. Not the ice heart technique? Then it must be the jade bone skill? Luo Xiao frowned. So what? Luo Xiao, let me ask you a question. After you killed my disciple and took his soul, did you deal with his body? Have you ever thought about what that body is doing now? Luo Xiao's face changed. You. Chapter 729. The conversation in the courtyard continued. However, the situation of the two sides seemed to be gradually reversed. Xianxi looked at Luo Xiao coldly and said, beating the grass to scare the snake is because if I didn't hit you, how could you expose your big weakness? You killed the shopkeeper of Qingfeng Enterprise and set up a trap in the City of Immortals to silence him. With these two solid evidence, even if your idiot master wants to protect you, he can't. Hearing this, Luo Xiao's expression of having everything under control finally converged and was replaced by a strong doubt. So, you really have been planning for a long time. But, how did you find out? Even my master couldn't see the slightest clue. How could you? Xianxi couldn't help but laugh and said, why? Good question. You must tell me because you and I are actually the same kind of person, so how could I not know what you're thinking? Luo Xiao said, the same kind of person? You and me? What a joke. Joke. Do you think the god of war blood is unique to you in this world? This time, Luo Xiao finally changed his face and said, you also have the god of war blood. So I know very well what people with this bloodline will do in a hurry. You have always locked Wang Lu as your opponent, but seeing that Wang Lu has left you farther and farther behind, and you have gradually lost the qualification to compete with him on the same stage, it's natural for a cornered dog to jump over the wall. The god of war blood is actually not afraid of failure. Even if you are repeatedly defeated, as long as your fighting spirit is not lost, you have the opportunity to start again. It's not smooth sailing for you in Huayan School. It took you a few years to defeat the lead disciple of the inner court. But the situation with Wang Lu is different, because you will soon find that you no longer have the chance to defeat him in theory. Luo Xiao said coldly, you have too much confidence in Wang Lu. It's because you're too confident in Wang Lu. It's because you believe that Wang Lu's advantage over you is too great that you can't make up for it. That's why you're willing to give up everything you have and take the risk. When Xianxi said this, there was a little more emotion in his plain tone. As the same kind, I have to admit that your choice is right. Oh? It sounds like you really understand what I'm thinking. Wang Lu's invincibility is based on the premise that you and him are in the same Wanxian League camp. In the Wanxian League, resources were limited. If Wang Lu took more, he would leave less for others. He had already taken away the only shortcut. No matter how well you did, you wouldn't be able to reach the heavens in one step under the King Pill realm like him. Therefore, only by jumping out of the framework of the Wanxian League could you struggle to have a chance of winning. Outside of the Wanxian League, you don't have many choices. First, the evil sections. Although there's the Wanxian League in 9 regions, the evil sects still occupy a vast area of land. The Demon's Nest in the easternmost land is also quite famous. Luo Xiao sneered, even the demon world has been destroyed, what can the demon sects in 9 regions do? The City of Immortals was clearly developed by the Wanxian League, but those demon sects hurriedly came out of the Demon's Nest to seek cooperation. It can be seen that their foundation has long been unstable, and it will be gradually eroded by the Wanxian League and even destroyed. It's just a matter of time. Xianxi said, the second is Dixian. Luo Xiao shook his head and said, Dixian seems to be powerful and invincible, but their number is small, and they're like a group of dragons without a leader. They have an absolute advantage in strength, but they're played by Wang Lu alone. These people can't do anything. Xianxi sneered and said, since neither of these two ways works, then there's only the third way, the fallen immortal. Luo Xiao was silent for a moment, and then faintly said, to be able to say the answer of the fallen immortal. It seems that you really can understand what I'm thinking. However, since you know that I chose to join the fallen immortal camp, why do you still dare to provoke me? Don't you know how powerful the fallen immortals are? Xianxi said, in the past, the true immortals of the upper realm were naturally powerful, but to say that they are omnipotent, that's not necessarily true. Otherwise, why would they accept the surrender of an insignificant ant like you? If even you can get great benefits from the fallen immortals, it can only mean that they have no one to use. Luo Xiao sneered and said, yes, they have the magical ability to destroy the world, but now they are still under a lot of restrictions, so it's difficult to display it in 9 regions. That's why they need the surrender of a local like me to help them complete the layout. As for whether I'm an insignificant ant or a precious chess piece, we can wait and see. Wait and see? There's no need to be so troublesome. I can guess what you're going to do. Xianxi sneered and said, if you surrender to the fallen immortals, you must have a proof of allegiance to win people's trust. And with your current conditions, the proof of allegiance that you can get is nothing more than Shizhoujin. Although his character is surly, he is very trusting of his own people. It's not difficult for you to accept this proof of allegiance. But I have a question for you. Luo Xiao, in my impression, although you're not a good person, you at least have your own bottom line in doing things. Even if Shizhoujin's kindness to you is not as heavy as a mountain, he can still be called your noble person. From Huayan School to 4-Element School, he has saved you at least 10 years of hard work. What's more, a teacher for a day is a father for life. Don't you feel guilty for killing your father for your own selfishness? Upon hearing this, Luo Xiao narrowed his eyes and said in a cold voice, Xianxi, you talk too much nonsense. Xianxi said, then I'll say something useful. From just now to now, you should have spent a lot of effort to find the body of that little mouse. I wonder if you found it? Or rather, is it enough for you to do it alone? Luo Xiao was silent for a moment and said, you want to talk to me about a deal? Otherwise, you don't have to waste your time talking to me here. Let me think about it. You know that I betrayed 9 regions, which is an unpardonable evil, but you still want to make a deal with me. Are you also interested in the fallen immortal? Hearing this, Xu Si, who was restrained in the puppet, was shocked. Dead face, what the hell do you want to do? Fallen immortal? Xianxi sneered a few times and said, if I'm interested in the fallen immortal, it's not your turn to surrender. Do you think you're the only one who is smart and knows how to take shortcuts? Don't deceive yourself. You're just a stray dog who has been cornered by Wang Lu. Very well. Luo Xiao nodded his head and said no more. His right hand grasped in the air, and suddenly, the burning flame in the courtyard was extinguished silently. Xianxi, who was close to deity stage, had a looming gold and silver rope on his body. There's not only one proof of allegiance. It's a pleasant surprise that you're so powerful. Xianxi was tied up by the rope, and his true yuan was imprisoned, unable to be released. However, his face did not change and there was even a faint smile on his face. Luo Xiao, use your brain. How can you fall into the same pit twice? Have you forgotten the jade bone technique? Luo Xiao's face changed and he quickly raised another hand, trying to trap Xianxi more tightly. However, it was a step too late. In the midst of Xianxi's wild laughter, his eyebrows shone brilliantly as if a sun was ignited. Self-destructing your yuaning, are you crazy? Luo Xiao didn't expect that this cultivator named Xianxi would be so unyielding. At the critical moment, Luo Xiao immediately changed his technique and took out a blood-stained scroll. The scroll was yellow in color, but once it was unfolded, it was full of vitality, as if it contained a boundless universe. Xianxi was sucked into the scroll in an instant. The scroll put away Xianxi and flew back to Luo Xiao's hand again. When Luo Xiao took the scroll, he only felt a slight tremble in his hand. He knew that this was the impact of Xianxi self-destructing his yuanying. The power was really strong. Unfortunately, for this sky fragment map, it could be easily resolved with a slight tremble. It's a pity. Luo Xiao shook his head, looking quite regretful. In fact, Luo Xiao really had no intention to kill Xianxi, although when he first set up the killing here, he wanted to kill him to silence him. But after a conversation, Luo Xiao felt that this person, who also had the god of war blood, might be able to play an unexpected role in the future. That was why he used the immortal binding rope instead of other more lethal magical weapons. At that time, he even made a decision in his heart that after he restrained Xianxi, he would spend a lot of effort to exonerate him in front of the fallen immortals. Who knew that this Xianxi would so decisively self-destruct his yuanying and choose death? In the information, this cultivator from Qingming Dojo was unknown and low-key. He really didn't look like someone who would do such a thing. What a pity. What a pity. After dealing with Xianxi, Luo Xiao was a bit dispirited. He came here to kill people to silence them so that the information about the fallen immortals wouldn't be leaked too early. Now, although the goal had been achieved, it left both regret and hidden danger. He turned his head and looked at the puppet that was transformed from Shu Xi's remnant soul. This puppet was originally used to lure Xianxi to take the bait. Now that Xianxi was dead, the bait was naturally useless. But he still had to keep it. After all, this was the shopkeeper of Qingfeng Enterprise. Dead Face came and went like a ghost. Only Shu Xi knew his existence, but there were too many people who knew Shu Xi. If he disappeared inexplicably, it was likely to cause unnecessary trouble. Luo Xiao found it a bit funny and said, "Those who should live don't live, but those who should die can't die immediately." While speaking outside the courtyard, a golden shadow quietly floated into the courtyard. A pure gold strong man appeared in front of Luo Xiao. The strong man carried a young man who had fainted on his shoulder. The young man had delicate features. It was Shu Xi. After the pure gold strong man put down the young man, he quietly left, leaving only a sentence, "Be careful next time." Luo Xiao shrugged his shoulders as if nothing had happened, but his back was soaked with cold sweat. It was not easy to deal with the fallen immortals. At the same time, in the Immortal 5 area, outside the small courtyard belonging to the chief planner of the organizing committee, a strange visitor arrived. The man seemed to be in his early 30s, tall, handsome, and particularly impressive was his pair of intelligent and spirited eyes. What was even more shocking was his red and white Taoist robe, because that was the uniform of the successor disciple of Lingjian school. Chapter 730. What? Wang Lu is not here? Are you kidding me? When we need to work overtime, you say he's not here. If you want to find a reasonable excuse, you should at least find it. Moreover, I'm not an outsider. Can't you see it from my clothes? Damn, I'm not a role-playing enthusiast. I'm wearing a genuine successor disciple of Spirit Sword sect, okay? You've been working for Wang Lu for so long, can't you even see the authenticity of the clothes? What? Haven't you heard that there's a fourth successor disciple in Lingjian school? What a joke. Of course, I'm not the fourth successor disciple, I'm the first. In theory, when your boss sees me, he should also call me senior brother. When he walked the immortal path to Spirit Sword Mountain, I watched the whole process. It could be said that I've witnessed his growth with my own eyes, yet you guys actually dare to stop me at the door. Outside the courtyard, a tall young man danced with excitement. The two young cultivators who guarded the door smiled helplessly, but they just didn't let him in. After a moment of noise, a lazy and irritated voice came from the courtyard. "What's the noise outside? Didn't I tell you to beat away all door-to-door salesmen?" After hearing this, the young cultivators who guarded the door seemed to be under even more pressure. One of them quickly turned around and bowed toward the courtyard, explaining, reporting to Taoist Master Nanfei's, "There's someone outside who claims to be the successor disciple of your sect, but I've never heard that your sect has a fourth successor disciple." At the same time, the tall young man looked happy. "Master, it's me." When the young cultivator at the door heard this, his knees went soft and his mind went blank. "Master?" In 9 regions there was only one person who would call Taoist Master Nanfei's master. Taoist Master Wang Lu. How did you become like this? In the eyes of these two people, the person outside the door was obviously Wang Lu in disguise. Although even his father wouldn't be able to recognize him, they were just two gatekeepers, yet they stopped the master of the courtyard outside the door. It was hard to imagine that they would end up well. Wang Lu was not a difficult person to talk to, but he was first and foremost a senior leader of the Wanxian League organizing committee. In most cases, it would not end well to make the leader unhappy. Just as the gatekeeper was about to collapse, the courtyard door was pushed open from the inside. A barefooted woman in white walked out of the courtyard with a rather complicated expression. The tall young man appeared to be of high status. "Master, long time no see." "Oh no, sorry, I forgot again." "Fifth Marshal Uncle, long time no see. How have you been all these years? I miss you very, very much. But you still look as beautiful as before. Everything must be going well, right?" Wang Wu looked at him. "Yinshen, why did you come back?" Hearing Yinshen's name, the two gatekeepers looked at each other. Their hearts that had sunk to the bottom of the valley floated up again. As long as it wasn't Wang Lu, everything would be fine. Who had ever heard of Yinshen? However, the two of them knew that it was best for them not to listen to the rest of the conversation, so they silently cupped their hands towards Wang Wu and disappeared without a trace. Wang Wu did not look at the two of them from the beginning to the end. Her attention was all focused on Yinshen. "Forget it, are you here to look for Wang Lu? He's really not here. Do you want me to look for your master to catch up? Yin Xian was a little surprised. Junior Wang Lu is really not here? It's not a good time for him to skip work. I have something important to tell him. But, fifth martial uncle, it's fine too. Something important? Wang Wu frowned. She knew that although Yin Xian was a little crazy, he would never joke about important matters. Due to various reasons, he spent most of his time wandering around the mountain and rarely came into contact with the people of Lingjian school. The last time they met was during the Immortal Gathering. After that, more than 30 years had passed, and Yin Xian had never appeared in the sight of Lingjian school. Now that he suddenly appeared, it must be a big deal. So, Wang Wu raised her hands slightly and a golden light enveloped the two of them. Say it, no one can hear you now. Yin Xian nodded and then spoke, but at the same time he passed the real information through the secret method of his primordial spirit. Xianxi is dead. This sentence made Wang Wu's eyes suddenly become sharp. You said Xianxi is dead? Yes, just now I was ambushed and killed. Before Yin Xian could finish his words, Wang Wu had already grabbed his wrist. Wang Wu put 4 fingers on Yin Xian's wrist, and after a moment of silence she put down her hand and sighed. Yin Xian smiled quite happily and said, I know that master still loves me. Wang Wu shook her head and said, Xianxi is dead. Even if you can suppress the backlash of the god of war blood for a while, you can't suppress it forever. Make a new doppelganger as soon as possible. Well, the materials have already been prepared, but you still need to help me. Wang Wu was silent for a while. Okay. In addition, who killed Xianxi? Good question. Yin Xian said excitedly, this is the main reason why I came to find Wang Lu. I believe that no one would have thought that the person who did it was Luo Xiao. He has defected to the fallen immortal camp and is helping them secretly arrange things. The next step is to deal with Shizhujin. Xianxi used a chess piece in his hand as bait to fish out Luo Xiao, forcing him to kill people so as to reveal a bigger flaw. As a result, Luo Xiao did fall into the trap and set up a killing trap in Xianxi's house to silence him. After listening to this statement, Wang Wu asked, can he see the connection between you and Xianxi? Yin Xian pondered for a moment. There's no reason to see it. At most, he was a little surprised by Xianxi's decisiveness in blowing up his Yuanying. But he couldn't find anything more. As for Xianxi's life experience, he only found out about Qingming Dojo. So, for him, killing people to silence them is a success? Yes, even the body puppet sent by Xianxi was intercepted and killed by him halfway. He should have nothing to worry about. Wang Wu didn't speak. After a moment of silence, she said, come with me. With that, Wang Wu clenched her right hand into a fist and swung it to the side. Boom. The silent impact shattered the space, and a hole appeared next to the courtyard. Come. Along the hole, Wang Wu took Yin Xian across thousands of rivers and mountains in one step, from the City of Immortals to the highest point in Blue River region, Spirit Sword Mountain. The place Wang Wu chose to stay was Spirit Pool Peak. At this time, sect leader Feng Yin, Lu Xian, and Fang He were all in the pink building of Spirit Pool Peak. Sensing the abnormal fluctuations outside the building, Fang He got up in surprise and came out to check the situation. He was not surprised to see Wang Wu. However, the person behind Wang Wu made Fang He open his mouth wide. And Xian? The next moment, Fang He was furious. He took 3 steps forward and slapped Yin Xian in the face. You still have the nerve to come back? Yin Xian was slapped thousands of feet away and fell all the way into the cloud and mist array outside Spirit Pool Peak. It took him a long time to float back. Half of his face was badly mutilated, but at this time, he smiled mischievously and said, Master is really old but vigorous. You're so old but your temper is more vigorous than young people. It's hard to imagine that you're just a mere Yuanying stage cultivator. At this time, Fang He slightly restrained his anger and looked at Yin Xian coldly. A mere Yuanying stage. The god of war blood is really extraordinary. 30 years ago you were still a step away from Shudan stage, but today you're almost standing side by side with me. No wonder you look down on a mere Yuanying stage cultivator. Yin Xian laughed and said, Master, you're too exaggerated. How can disciples stand side by side with you? Although we're both in Yuanying stage, you can at least beat 100 of me. I still have this self-knowledge. With that, Yin Xian's smile also converged a bit. Compared with your generation who have experienced the catastrophe, what's a mere god of war blood? Master, you really don't need to have too much of a sense of crisis. Sense of crisis? What a joke. Fang He was about to attack but was stopped by Wang Wu. Senior brother, I didn't bring him here to quarrel with you. I'm afraid something big is going to happen in the City of Immortals. Fang He looked at Wang Wu in surprise. For this mischievous fellow to become so focused and serious, could it be that it was really something extraordinary? Come in. Fang He then brought the two into the pink house. Inside the building, when Feng Yin and Lu Xian saw Yin Xian, they were equally surprised. However, Yin Xian didn't waste time talking nonsense. He went straight to the point and told them everything that his avatar, Xian Yinzi, had seen and heard. After hearing the whole story, the elders in the spirit pool peak were all silent. After a long time, Fang He tapped the table with his knuckles and said, "Senior brother, according to the emergency procedure of the Wanxian League, this matter should be reported to the Heavenly Sage Hall as soon as possible." However, Lu Xian shook his head and said, "Heavenly Sage Hall? Who knows if the people in there are reliable? Even an ant like Luo Xiao has been infiltrated by the fallen immortals. I don't believe that there are no insiders among the higher-ups of the fallen immortals. Let alone others." When Luo Xiao restrained Xian Yinzi, who intercepted Xu Xi's body, Fang He said, "That person is obviously an assistant to Luo Xiao. Would the elders of Heavenly Sage Hall be willing to be under Luo Xiao?" Lu Xian still disagreed. Not necessarily. In the eyes of the fallen immortals, whether it's deity stage or king pill, I'm afraid they are no different from ants. Compared with their cultivation base, I'm afraid they care more about other things. Moreover, Yin Xian, did you see that person's face? Yin Xian said, "The person who did it hid very deeply. His method of hiding his tracks is very brilliant. Although Xian Yinzi has a trace of primordial spirit attached to Xu Xi's body, he was strangled before he could see the opponent's real body. Although it's only a trace of primordial spirit, it's still the primordial spirit of a Yuanying stage cultivator. At least it's not something that an ant like Luo Xiao can do." While Lu Xian and Fang He were still in a dispute, Wang Wu suddenly stood up. "Junior sister, where are you going?" Wang Wu looked at the several people in the room with contemptuous eyes. "You bunch of idiots are really hopeless. You can quarrel as long as you want. I'm going to find Shijiojin first." With that, she shattered the space with another punch and stepped into the void with a single step. Inside the pink house, several elders looked at each other in dismay. Indeed. At least, there should be no problem with Shijiojin, who is listed as their target. Chapter 731. After Wang Wu left, the rest of the people were not in a hurry to take action. On Shijiojin's side, Wang Wu alone was enough. And the people left in the pink house had other things to solve. They needed to carefully examine Yin Xian, a true disciple who had left the sect for more than 30 years and suddenly returned. This was the first successor disciple that Feng Yin and the others had accepted since they returned to the sect after the Great Catastrophe and reorganized their sect. In the beginning, Yin Xian was handed over to Fang He for guidance. Although the disciplinary elder was not good at teaching disciples, his cultivation method happened to be able to deal with Yin Xian's god of war blood. Soon Yin Xian displayed an astonishing talent for cultivation. Even compared with the golden generation of Lingjian school, Yin Xian was not inferior. As the first true disciple of Heavenly Sword Hall, Yin Xian was absolutely able to control the situation. Until the difference between him and Fang He became bigger and bigger. Fang He was indeed not good at teaching disciples. Apart from the reason of character, the cultivation method he designed for Yin Xian was increasingly difficult to satisfy the chief true disciple. Fang He's temperament was old-fashioned and stubborn, and he paid attention to following the rules and restraining his desires. Therefore, what he taught Yin Xian was the way to fight against all kinds of desires in his heart. By defeating his own desires, he stimulated the god of war blood. This set of cultivation method did play a big role at first, but with the progress of Yin Xian's cultivation, the god of war blood needed more intense and direct battles. This kind of child's play was difficult to satisfy Yin Xian's appetite. After that, Wang Wu magically added a stroke to it. She designed a set of self-created doppelganger method for Yin Xian, which divided Yin Xian into two and created a doppelganger named Xian Yinzi. This clone inherited Yin Xian's ruthless temperament and the same burning hot god of war blood. Its strength was almost the same as the original body, so Yin Xian could finally enjoy the battle that made his blood boil. It was precisely because of this that Yin Xian always regarded Wang Wu as his true master. However, of course, Wang Wu would not admit that she had received such a disciple, and Fang He also had a lot of dissatisfaction with Xian Yinzi. So Yin Xian finally chose to leave the mountain and wander. Dozens of years passed. Yin Xian, it's been hard on you all these years. As the sect leader, I have failed in my duty. Feng Yin's long sigh set the tone for the rest of the conversation. Fang He's complexion suddenly turned somewhat ugly. Feng Yin, as the sect leader, claimed to have neglected his duties. What about him as the master? However, in front of Feng Yin, this inflexible disciplinary elder would never overstep his boundaries because of his personal preferences. He sat quietly in the hall, looking down and not saying a word. On the other hand, Yin Shen was still lively and cheerful. Martial uncle sect leader is exaggerating. In just over 30 years, I went from half a step into the Shudan stage to where I am today. Although I had to work hard for myself, the foundation that my master had laid for me also couldn't go unnoticed, to be honest. With my speed, even junior brother Wang Lu shouldn't be able to match me, right? Lu Xian shook his head. In terms of pure cultivation speed, if it was half a year ago he was indeed slightly inferior to you. Before achieving the King Pill, his cultivation speed was not ridiculously fast. But now he has also advanced to the Yuanying stage and his progress is rapid. If you really fight, you may not be his opponent. Yin Shen was a little surprised, but he was not depressed at all. Instead, he sighed sincerely. To be able to receive the teachings of fifth uncle at a close distance, this kind of advantage is indeed not something that a mere god of war blood can make up for. Then he changed the topic. Well, although my cultivation progress is not as good as yours, I have been living a free and unfettered life these years, and I have violated some sect rules. Before he finished speaking, he heard Fang He snort coldly, and the temperature in the whole hall dropped a few degrees. Yin Shen immediately changed his words. I have done a heroic deed such as robbing the rich to help the poor. Moreover, although it is indeed inconvenient to be split into two, it is also because I have this avatar, Xianyinzi, that I occupy both sides of yin and yang, and we are each other's mortal enemies. We fight each other endlessly, and the god of war blood continues to boil, so that in just over 30 years, I can soar from half a step into the Shudan stage all the way to the present realm. For this I have no regrets. As soon as his voice fell, Yin Shen caught a glimpse of Fang He's livid face, and quickly added, of course Xianyinzi's avatar has inherited the cold-blooded and ruthless part of my heart, and it is inevitable that he will violate human relations. But he is him and I am me. He is your avatar. You are responsible for the sins he has committed. Fang He roared. Yin Shen immediately changed his words. Yes, this disciple knows this very well. Therefore, for more than 30 years, I have been trying to correct and stop his extreme behavior and have achieved good results. I will never let him do the unimaginable act of destroying the Qingming Dojo again. Speaking of this, I have always wanted to add that the Qingming Dojo looks like a dog on the surface, but in fact, it is a place where men are thieves and women are prostitutes. They deserve to be destroyed. There are 3,972 people in the Qingming Dojo. Do you dare to say that none of them are innocent? Yin Shen frowned. Master, this is where your and my ideas have always been diametrically opposed. Those people in the Qingming Dojo, if you ask whether they have never done evil with their own hands, there must be. But in such a big environment, the existence of each of them is contributing to the continuation of the dojo. In other words, their existence is evil. Although Xianyinzi's way is extreme, it is not incomprehensible. Fang He was even angrier. However, compared with Yin Shen's refutation, Fang He was more concerned about what he said. Xianyinzi is dead. Has his idea begun to affect you? Yin Shen was silent for a while. Actually, when you forced me to kneel down and repent, I was just fooling you. I always thought that Xianyinzi did a good job. Well, now is not the time to care about these old things. Feng Yin stretched out his hand to interrupt Fang He. Yin Shen, this time, you were able to discover the action of the fallen immortals first, which is a great achievement, but did you calculate all this a long time ago? Yin Shen said, of course it's impossible. At first I or Xianyinzi just wanted to cultivate a useful chess piece, but no one expected that this chess piece would really play a big role. Haha, that little guy died a worthy death. At this time, Fang He couldn't help but snort coldly, worthy death? Shu Si still trusted you until the last moment before his death, but you mercilessly threw him away as an abandoned chess piece. Yin Shen shrugged and said, well, I think. No, it's Xianyinzi who thinks that he and Shu Si don't owe each other anything. Shu Si was originally a vagrant in the marketplace. If it weren't for Xianyinzi's support, I'm afraid he wouldn't have lived to the age of 30. Fang He coldly said, he hasn't lived to the age of 15. But he has experienced the joy that most people in the world can't experience. The shopkeeper of Qingfeng Enterprise, even if it's only for a day, is more valuable than a vagrant for a lifetime. Yin Shen sternly said, on this point No, Xianyinzi doesn't think Shu Si has the right to complain. Seeing that the master and disciple were about to quarrel again, Feng Yin interrupted with a question. Enough, now is not the time to care about this. "Yin Xian, what else do you have to say about the fallen immortals?" Yin Xian said, "There's one thing. After Luo Xiao killed Xian Yinzi, he didn't kill Shu Si along with him. Instead, he left a wisp of his remnant soul on the puppet. I can now clearly sense that Shu Si's remnant soul is still active. Although the jade bone technique that Shu Si cultivated seemed to be the same as the relatively popular Ice Heart secret art, it naturally added some special content, so that Yin Xian could control this chess piece at any time, even if the other party only had a wisp of remnant soul left." In this regard, although Feng Yin Taoist master didn't say it explicitly, it was obvious from his expression that he didn't agree with it. This kind of cultivation method that directly refined people as puppets was definitely not honorable, or to put it bluntly, it was simply an evil and crooked cultivation method. Even without Luo Zhao's betrayal, Shu Si would never have been able to achieve anything on the road of immortal cultivation by relying on the jade bone technique. However, the difference between Feng Yin and Fang He was that he knew how to be flexible. "So, can you sense the movements of Luo Xiao through the remnant soul?" Yin Xian said, "It's very difficult. On one hand, Shu Si's remnant soul can't bear too many things. On the other hand, Luo Xiao is not with Shu Si right now. He seems to have other things to do. However, Shu Si's remnant soul can be used as a foreshadowing, and Luo Xiao will not make any unnecessary movements. Leaving Shu Si alive is most likely because he wants to further control the Qingfeng Trading Company through the flesh puppet. Although that trading company is my plaything, the scale is not small, and it can completely make waves. He kept Shu Si's remnant soul in order to deceive people. The puppet with the remnant soul is almost no different from the real body. With Shu Si's social circle, no one can see through it at a glance. But we can also take advantage of this point, and at a critical time, it may play an unexpected role." Feng Yi nodded, "You're very thoughtful." Yin Xian smiled and said, "Thank you for the praise, sect leader uncle. So, after saying so much, may I ask, am I qualified?" Feng Yin was slightly startled. Yin Xian took this opportunity to ask, "I mean, can I win your trust?" Feng Yin heaved a long sigh and was speechless. At the same time, an uninvited guest arrived at the Four Element Sect's encampment. "Four Element Sect. I know you're here, don't pretend to be dead. A distinguished guest is here, but you don't send people to welcome her, but you actually dare to close the door on me? Be careful that I break the door and go in to catch you in bed." The barefooted woman in white loudly provoked the no less than 20 pairs of angry eyes at the entrance of the encampment. For the cultivators of the Four Element Sect, this was really a rare spectacle in decades. A dignified high-rank Wanxian League sect was actually blocked and scolded by a Taoist Master King Pil? This was simply unheard of. However, considering that the person who made this bizarre move was the famous number 1 King Pil in 9 regions, these gatekeepers could only swallow their anger. Because even if they wanted to make a sound, it was not their turn. Shizhou was indeed cultivating in seclusion in the encampment. And when encountering this kind of thing, it was impossible for him not to show up. Sure enough, after the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, Shizhou stepped out of his cave residence and came to the outside of the encampment, in front of Wang Wu. There was an obvious angry look on his face, and how could the anger of a supreme be ordinary? The several King Pil cultivators who guarded the gate, even just looking at his back, felt difficult to breathe. "What's the matter?" Chapter 732. Of course. Wang Wu nodded heartily and generously. In the face of Shizhou, who was as majestic as the ocean, her posture did not waver at all. The number 1 King Pil in 9 regions was indeed a well-deserved reputation. The gatekeeper cultivators could not help but sigh that the old saying was too accurate. In the world there were only wrong names but no wrong nicknames. In the face of the anger of a supreme, which King Pil in the world could be so calm and collected? Several of the gatekeepers were also the best of the King Pil, and they were also cultivators of Four Element Sect. However, just looking at the back of Shizhou, they felt that their bladder was a bit swollen. They asked themselves honestly, even if they cultivated for another 10 or 20 years and had a big breakthrough in their stage, it was likely that it would still be difficult for them to face the anger of a supreme. However, Wang Wu seemed to be at ease, and her potential was completely bottomless. Such a person could not be measured by the standard of King Pil. She was a monster who looked like a King Pil. A monster who dared to speak wildly in front of a supreme. "I'm here to challenge you." At this moment, Shizhou's anger was suppressed by a greater shock. Challenge me? Even though Shizhou had been well informed, he really did not expect to encounter such a strange thing. Wang Wu, the #1 king pill in 9 regions who had quite a good evaluation in the high-level circle, was possessed by the devil in her cultivation, and the devil chi entered her brain? She actually dared to challenge a supreme who had been famous for many years and was good at actual combat? Could it be that in the past 6 months of the grand competition, the excessive emphasis on the grading system made her forget herself and really think that she was omnipotent? However, even if Wang Wu's self-confidence was too inflated, what reason did she have to challenge him? Thus, Shi Jiujin was silent in the face of the challenge, waiting for Wang Wu's further explanation. If this explanation did not satisfy him, he did not mind using painful and unforgettable means to teach his opponent the insurmountable gap between the form synthesis stage and the king pill stage. There was a momentary calm before the storm. The next moment Wang Wu opened her mouth. She seemed to have expected such a question, so she calmly said, "I am here to protect the moral standard of 9 regions." "What did you say?" Shi Jiujin's eyes widened in disbelief. The majesty of the dark clouds covering the sky gradually dissipated due to excessive shock. Wang Wu, the woman who was known as the holder of the lower limit in 9 regions, actually claimed that she came to protect the moral standard? For you, the best way to protect the morality of 9 regions is to pull out your sword and commit suicide. But after saying these absurd words, Wang Wu became even more serious. "I'm not joking. Although the world has many misunderstandings about me, deep in my heart I am a person who cares about the world. I am known as the #1 king pill in 9 regions, so naturally I have to do something for this land that I love deeply." Shi Jiujin endured the churning of his stomach and said, "Well, even if you care about the world, why did you come to my 4-element sect and talk nonsense?" Wang Wu said, "I am here to challenge you. As we all know, Supreme is the most famous reproduction expert in 9 regions." "Humph?" Shi Jiujin nodded with a slightly smug look. His anger at being challenged by Wang Wu's rude challenge had slightly subsided. He was not a straightforward person who was easy to be coaxed, but anyone would always be happy when they were praised in their most proud and good field. Moreover, except for Wang Wu, few people would so bluntly praise him as a reproduction expert. This title simply made Shi Jiujin overjoyed. However, the next moment, the joy disappeared. "And also the biggest asterisk in 9 regions. You're the asterisk. Shi Jiujin was so angry that if he didn't have the supreme-level immortal heart to suppress his impulse, he would have immediately attacked Wang Wu. "Since you know that I am the most professional reproduction expert in 9 regions, you should naturally understand that I hate those mating behaviors that have nothing to do with reproduction. For example, those short-sighted people in yin and yang school who only know how to enjoy and use the joy of sex, but refuse to think about the next generation of 9 regions when yin and yang are in harmony. I have always despised them. What I am engaged in is a great cause. That's just your self-righteousness and narcissism." Wang Wu unceremoniously said, "In fact, the way of reproduction that you advocate will only become a breeding ground for ****. Cultivators who live in the present will not consider the future thousands of years later. For them, the way of reproduction will only be an excuse to enjoy the joy of sex. Promoting reproduction is to promote ****. When you righteously advocate reproduction, have you ever thought that if your children lose their chastity at a young age and sink into the joy of sex?" Shi Jiujin angrily said, "I have children, and each of them is an upright person. None of them have fallen into depravity." Wang Wu's face did not change. "But there are thousands of parents in 9 regions who, because of the way of reproduction that you advocate, have to painfully watch their children fall into depravity in ****. For this, you, the reproduction expert, are duty-bound to do so. Whether it's your subjective will or not, you are the biggest **** in 9 regions." Shi Jiujin was so angry by this rogue logic that he could hardly speak. However, Wang Wu pursued the victory, "And I, the moral guardian of 9 regions, the promoter of the concept of chastity, the great anti-sex fighter, want to establish a correct outlook on life for the cultivators of 9 regions by defeating you. Let them know that the so-called evil way of reproduction is absolutely not feasible. Anyone who dares to do **** in 9 regions will be firmly spurned." Before she could finish, she was interrupted by Shi Jiujin's roar. "Wang Wu, go to hell." The next moment, the supreme-level battle was about to officially begin in the City of Immortals. However, Wang Wu was still calm and collected. "Wait a minute." As she said that, she pulled out the emerald green bamboo sword from her waist and pointed it in front of her. Suddenly, the space within a radius of several dozens of meters appeared unnatural contraction and expansion, which made several cultivators of four-element school feel very uncomfortable. Shijojin showed a slightly surprised look. Just now he made a move in anger. Although it was not his full strength, so it was not a killing move, in theory it could definitely injure Wang Wu. Shijojin had a very good estimate of Wang Wu's strength, so he did not treat her like a king pill. Just now, the invisible four-phase break was the treatment of a deity stage cultivator. However, although Wang Wu reluctantly received it, in the end she still received it. What else do you want to say? Wang Wu shook her sore wrist and said, if we do it here it will only benefit Dixian. Let's go to the arena. Okay. Shijojin gritted his teeth and temporarily held back his anger. In the City of Immortals there was no shortage of arenas. Outside the central arena in Immortal 1 area, there were countless arenas of various sizes. And there was no lack of large venues that could accommodate the supreme level battle. Wang Wu and Shijojin left the station. Halfway there, Shijojin suddenly asked, what exactly do you want from me this time? Although at first he was really angered by Wang Wu that his primordial spirit trembled, Shijojin didn't need to think about it to understand that Wang Wu would never come to provoke him for no reason. Especially after that sentence, she deliberately led him to the arena. There must be a reason behind this series of strange behavior. Supreme's eyes are like a torch, so I will say it directly. Sure enough, Wang Wu restrained her gentlemanly demeanor and became more familiar. There's a big problem with that successor disciple of yours. When Shijojin heard this, countless scenes flashed in his mind, and then he understood why Wang Wu inexplicably provoked and angered him. Because shortly before Wang Wu came, Luo Xiao suddenly found him and said that he had something to discuss with him. Of course, Shijojin attached great importance to his own successor disciple. But he couldn't turn a blind eye to Wang Wu's provocation outside the door. So he could only send Luo Xiao away and deal with the trouble of Wang Wu first. Now it seemed that this was Wang Wu's intention. What's the problem with Luo Xiao? Wang Wu was silent for a while. What I'm going to say next will be unimaginable. With our friendship, I don't expect Supreme to believe me. But you should at least listen to it once. Shijojin said, just based on the sword you used to block my four phases break, I can listen to your story no matter how ridiculous it is. Okay then. Wang Wu frowned and began to think about how to phrase her words. Being a lobbyist was really not her specialty. Especially when the person she was trying to persuade was a rather eccentric reproduction expert. Especially when she didn't have any words prepared. In fact, she was forced to fight just now. Wang Wu didn't expect Luo Xiao's action to be so fast. It was reasonable to say that after killing Xianxi, he should at least spend some time to deal with the follow-up work. And he also had to consider whether there was a possibility of his plan being leaked. As a result, he actually came directly to Shijojin. If it weren't for Wang Wu's timely interruption, he would have succeeded. At that time, Wang Wu and Luo Xiao had already noticed each other's existence. Wang Wu and Shijojin didn't have any friendship, so it was easy for her to be rejected. Luo Xiao would definitely think of an excuse to hold Shijojin back and not let the two meet. Therefore, Wang Wu had to take an unconventional approach. As an anti-sex fighter, she forced Shijojin to come out. The only problem was that her actions just now seemed to be a bit too obvious. It was inevitable that it would alert the enemy. Would Luo Xiao realize that he had been exposed? Would he further think about the secret of Xianxi? However, she really couldn't care so much. At this time, Wang Wu suddenly became a little lost in thought. Because she thought that if Wang Lu was here, there might be a way to make the best of both worlds. Not only could it prevent Luo Xiao from attacking Shijojin, but it could also arrange all of this so that Luo Xiao couldn't say any flaws and doubts. Wang Lu had too many tricks up his sleeves. So, bitch, when it's time for you to show up, where the hell are you slacking off? Chapter 733. Hissed Roar. Accompanied by a long and desolate dragon roar, a flash of light exploded in the middle of the vortex of stars. A slender dragon that stretched for hundreds of miles was severed in the middle. The sea of blood was like a river of stars, but in a moment, the two halves of the corpse were wrapped in the sea of stars and quickly melted in the starlight. At the same time, the world inside the body of the dragon as well as the millions of creatures in that world also disappeared. Another Gisaurus died tragically, and the culprit was completely indifferent to the annihilation of millions of creatures. A pair of cold eyes kept looking for new targets in the vortex of stars, filled with murderous intent. This scene that was even colder than the abyss was soon interrupted by a slightly tired young voice, and it came to an abrupt end. I say, respected Senior Tetragon, have your hormones been a little out of whack recently? In the vortex of stars, the cold eyes that set off countless bloody storms turned indifferently. The power of an imperial emperor was enough to make the stars tremble, but the person who spoke seemed calm and composed in the face of all this. However, he was somewhat frowning. Previously, you said that the real traitor must be hiding in the vortex of stars. I asked why, and you said that your intuition told you the answer. I believe you. You said that if you want to catch that person as soon as possible, you have to keep releasing pressure and force him to reveal himself, which I wholeheartedly agree with. Then, you said that you want me to watch the whole process, and that I would rather accompany you to slack than work overtime, so I also agreed. But, this is the absurd play that you want me to watch? The daily life of the dragon-slaying hero Tetragon? Wang Lu curled his lips. So far, I have accompanied you to watch the dragon-slaying drama for 3 days, and the number of Gisaurus that have died in your hands is almost in the double digits. You have indeed shown your invincible power very well, but what is the meaning of this kind of killing? To vent your anger? To vent your anger? Or do you think that the traitor might be hiding inside those Gisaurus? Moreover, the foundation of the existence of the tombs of immortals is these Gisaurus. If you kill all the Gisaurus, the structure of the tombs of immortals will be finished, and the inheritance that you guys have worked so hard to leave in those years will also be ruined. Or, are you going to use this kind of heroic way to make me fall in love with you so that we can get married? I'm sorry, I'm not really into this kind of thing, and I don't think you'll be so bold and unrestrained. In that case, after thinking about it, I could only ask the question I just asked. Senior Tetragon, are you suffering from hormonal imbalance? Looking at Tetragon's cold eyes, Wang Lu said, "Don't worry, I won't laugh at you. On the path of immortal cultivation, the higher the realm, the more likely it is for a cultivator to suffer from some quirks. For example, I know that there is an old man named Shijojin, who devoted his whole life to promoting the way of reproduction, which caused him to fall from a person of high character to a peerless aberration. Therefore, if you tell me now that your hobby is to kill Gisaurus, I will really believe it. Senior Tetragon, are you the kind of person who is suffering from hormonal imbalance?" To Wang Lu's sincere question, Tetragon's response was to turn his head and lock his eyes on a leisurely floating Gisaurus on the other side of the infinitely distant river of stars. The next moment, Tetragon disappeared from his original place. In the blink of an eye, he appeared thousands of miles away. His slender jade-like hand turned into a sharp invisible blade and cut off the head of the Gisaurus. A Gisaurus, which was born with magical ability and whose power was comparable to that of an immortal beast, was killed by Tetragon in one move. Wang Lu, who watched all of this from the side, gently sighed. A person with hormonal imbalance probably can't make such a decisive slash. Before he could finish his words, Wang Lu felt that Tetragon's gaze changed slightly, because the mystery of that slash just now was not so easy to see. At least for most of the cultivators in 9 regions, they could only sigh with emotion at the invincible power of Tetragon, but they did not understand that the slash she raised was the sharp blade of the immortal heart. On the one hand, it proved that her mentality was still rational and calm. On the other hand, it was also a test for Wang Lu to see if he could understand her intention. Of course, Wang Lu could see it clearly. Although there was a world of difference in strength between them, his eyesight was absolutely not bad. 150 years ago, he once fought against a genuine fallen immortal head-on. He had seen a lot about the means of immortals. However, these were all details. After this slash, Wang Lu was finally able to confirm his conjecture. He shook his head and said, "If your current killing is not because of the hormonal imbalance, then, the only explanation I can think of is this. These Gisaurus have a reason to die. But they are clearly the basis of the group of immortal tombs that you have painstakingly found and cultivated. If you need to kill them, you should have killed them a long time ago. So, the change should be after your resuscitation, right? No, it should be not long ago because with your temperament, I'm afraid you won't have any patience in this matter. As for the content of the change, I guess it's because you have been poisoned by some irreparable and extremely destructive poison?" A trace of surprise appeared on Tetragon's face, but she quickly restrained it. She had expected that Wang Lu was very keen, but she did not expect that his keenness could reach this point. For 3 days she did not explain what she was doing at all, but Wang Lu could actually infer all this almost out of thin air. She examined Wang Lu with unprecedented concentration. It was not a strong aggressiveness, but it could penetrate all external defenses. After a long time, Tetragon was somewhat satisfied, but also somewhat helplessly opened his mouth to reveal the truth. Yes, these Gisaurus have been contaminated. The fallen immortals can instigate them at any time with a password, and then take the treasures buried in their bodies as their own. Of course, with the vision of the fallen immortals, they may not be interested in the heritage we left behind, but at least we will never have the chance to get it again. Wang Lu shrugged and said, but you cut off these G-Saurus so quickly, but it seems that you didn't have time to take anything out of them? You didn't even have time to deal with the hundreds of millions of creatures in the G-Saurus. It's better than more G-Saurus being contaminated. Senior Gem Emperor explained, this poison. 16,000 years ago, we had a deep understanding of it. It's highly contagious, irreversible, corrosive, and absolutely lethal when it breaks out. The only way to deal with it is to eliminate all the infected people the moment it's discovered. This is a mercy to everyone. When he heard this, Wang Lu was shocked and could not help but be silent for a long time. Was there really such a terrible poison in this world? Even G-Saurus, a magical creature that could contain a world, could not resist it? However, from another point of view, the person who made and administered the poison was a high and mighty immortal, and his means were indeed not something that the cultivators of 9 regions could understand. So, is your main body staying here to deal with this strange poison? Tetragon said, I would not rest assured if anyone else did this except me. Moreover, no matter how contagious this poison is, there must be a source for it to spread. I think I'm close to grasping the root of it. Wang Lu smiled and said, is there a need to gradually catch that? Right now, there are only a few exiles left in the whirlpool of stars, and they can be easily excluded by the method of elimination. Senior, when you made a prompt decision to expel Bai Zhe and the others, did you ever think that you would encounter such trouble? Tetragon admitted his mistake very frankly, this is indeed an unexpected trouble. But at that time I had no better choice. And now, your main body is equivalent to being contained here. Is there only one avatar of yours in the City of Immortals? Tieske, it seems that if there is no accident, it would be a waste of this layout. When Wang Lu said this, he subconsciously lifted his foot but soon took it back. No, since this is a layout, it should not be that easy for me to go back. So, Senior, is this the reason why you coaxed and pestered me to stay? Tetragon said, here my main body can take care of you. In the City of Immortals there are your companions and my avatar, but only between these two no one can help you. Strictly speaking, the space between the whirlpool of stars and the City of Immortals was also the territory that had been developed by the Wanxian League. However, in this case no one could guarantee that it was safe. Wang Lu was silent for a while and said, can you fully grasp the situation in the City of Immortals through the connection between your main body and avatar? Of course. Tetragon said, if you are interested in the situation over there, I can tell you that the fallen immortals in the City of Immortals have begun to act. I can clearly smell their stench, but... Wang Lu sighed and said, but you still can't accurately locate them? I'm starting to suspect that your sense of smell might have been taken advantage of by others. Chapter 734. That's the story I brought to you. Somewhere in the arena in the City of Immortals, Wang Wu racked her brains and finally finished the story of Yin Xian and Luo Xiao without revealing too many secrets. After hearing the story, Shizhou looked thoughtful and was not in a hurry to respond. Wang Wu's story was indeed a good story. Although many key points were obviously erased, it was still a very convincing story on the whole. However, should he trust her? A woman who had little interaction with him and had no friendship with him at all? However, on the other hand, although he had no friendship with the people of Lingjian School, and the communication between the Four Elements sect and Lingjian School was also very few. However, there was also no hatred between them. So, what was the reason for her to come all the way to tell him such a ridiculous story? What benefit could she get? On the other hand, if the story was true, but he was negligent, the price would be too great. Good story. After a long silence, Shizhou made a decision. But it's not a story that can convince everyone. Wang Wu said with a cynical look, I don't have high expectations for the average IQ of the cultivators of 9 regions. Very good. Shizhou nodded and said again, very good. I will deal with this matter myself. Wang Wu smiled and said, then I will wait for the good news. The next moment, Shizhou disappeared from his place. His back looked slightly desolate. However, Wang Wu gradually restrained her smile, or rather her smile became a bit mean. She raised her hand, used her finger as a pen and wrote out of thin air. A moment later, an invisible letter was written. The content was very simple. It was to ask the elders of Lingjian School, Lu Li and Zhou Ming, who were in the City of Immortals, to keep an eye on Shizhou and wait for him. She didn't believe that Shizhou could deal with Luo Xiao alone. Because Luo Xiao was not alone at all, and Shizhou might not be so cruel to this successor disciple whom he was once quite optimistic about. Considering Shijojin's IQ, letting him deal with it alone was simply letting him die. After the letter was written, Wang Wu pinched her fingers and released the invisible letter. This kind of secret letter, stimulated by her true yuan, was even faster than the ordinary flying sword. In the arena, she watched the letter go away and gradually showed a look of relief. After a while, she was already whistling and throwing a self-made die in her hand. It was also six-sided, but the words on it were, eat, drink, whore, gamble, smoke all at once, and judging from the smooth surface of the die, it seemed that it was used frequently. As expected, the result of the dice was all. Wang Wu chuckled twice and then leisurely left the arena. However, the moment she stepped out of the arena, her expression suddenly became fierce. Her usual laziness was swept away, and her eyes were as sharp as two swords. Damn it, I knew there would be blind idiots who would intercept my letter. This letter was Wang Wu's real bait. Although she was not sure that she and Shijojin would be targeted, it was never wrong to be a little more careful. After all, she was not the little girl who had to rely on her senior brother 150 years ago. Now that Wang Lu was not there and Feng Yin and the others were still on Spirit Sword Mountain, she had to act in the City of Immortals. In fact, she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. It only took Wang Wu a moment to come to the place where the letter was intercepted. Immortal 3 area, a long and narrow corridor. It was a closed corridor connecting Immortal 3 area and Immortal 5 area. There were not many pedestrians coming and going, and it was also a set of channels deliberately chosen by Wang Wu. Because it was the most inconspicuous to make a move here, and she could quickly escape to other places from the relatively accessible Immortal 5 area. The only problem was that, since Wang Wu had already calculated this, she would appear here at an unexpected speed and block the person who intercepted the letter. Of course, considering that the opponent was a fallen immortal, it was also very likely that the person who intercepted the letter could not be blocked. However, that could also explain the problem. The fallen immortals in the City of Immortals already had an expert that Wang Wu could not stop. Luo Xiao was probably just a camouflage, a puppet pushed in front of the stage to attract attention. However, when Wang Wu finally arrived at the scene, she could not help but show a wry smile. Damn it, it's really watertight. The person who intercepted the letter was indeed blocked by her. 3 little bastards in miscellaneous cultivator robes, whose cultivation base was between Foundation Establishment and Shudan Stage. At this time, they were happily using a fine net to wrap Wang Wu's invisible letter. They talked with each other about how to distribute the next windfall. With just one glance, Wang Wu guessed the other party's means. She didn't appear, but hired a few temporary workers to carry the blame. This move was really slippery. What could she do now? Catch these 3 small fries and then try to find the melon by following the vines? It would be strange if she could find the melon. Wang Wu didn't even need to think with her knees to know where these 3 little bastards came from. It must be an unidentified mysterious person who gave them a small sum of money and gave them a set of capture nets so that they could quickly rush to the corresponding position to intercept them. And that mysterious person was most likely instructed by someone. Right now, they could only find a corpse at most, and all the relevant clues had been destroyed. Therefore, Wang Wu had no interest in these 3 small fries. She pondered for a moment in front of the long and narrow corridor, quickly adjusted her goal, and then her figure flashed away. She decided to find Shijojin. According to normal circumstances, she should have just caught the 3 small fries. Although they were small fries and although most of the clues were doomed to be destroyed, this was not the mortal world, but the City of Immortal cultivation world. If he searched carefully, he would definitely be able to find some clues. Even if it was a skeleton that had been destroyed, he could use the soul tracking technique, the great divination technique, and other techniques to reverse the karma and trace it back to the past. And in the current situation, she should not let go of even the slightest clue. However, on the other hand, Wang Wu thought if she really did that, what would it mean? It meant that no one would care about Shijojin at all. The other party should be waiting for such an opportunity. And judging from the impression that she had always left, perhaps she did not have the IQ to properly deal with the situation. The famous number 1 king pill in 9 regions had never been known for her superb wisdom. About Wang Wu, people only knew 2 things. First, she was really strong. Second, she had no moral integrity at all. Perhaps only the people in Lingjian school, those who had fought with Wang Wu for more than 100 years, could deeply understand that when needed, Wang Wu could be much more shrewd than most people. This point could be proved by the white hair and wrinkles on disciplinary elder Fang He's head. When Wang Wu appeared in front of the 4-element sect again as expected, she was greeted with a closed door. The gatekeepers at the door were replaced by 2 tall and mighty men, who exuded the aura of Yuanying stage. Sending a Taoist master of Yuanying stage to guard the door. Perhaps even Xingjing sect could not do such an extravagant move. This was of course not the norm for the Four-Element sect. In other words, something extraordinary had happened inside the station. Wang Wu did not hesitate to break the door. And the two gatekeepers also did not hesitate to block her way. Of course, they would not be arrogant enough to think that they could suppress the king pill in front of them because they were in Yuanying stage. However, Wang Wu was notoriously strong in defense but weak in attack. As the elites of the Four-Element sect, they could not even block her. Then they were sent flying. The two Taoist masters of Yuanying stage were like straw floating in the sky. Until their primordial spirits surged and they lost consciousness, they could not believe that they, who were good at strength and defense, and were connected to the station's great array, would actually be sent flying by the opponent. They had long known that Wang Wu was strong, but no one had ever heard that she was this strong. At the same time, Wang Wu unceremoniously slammed into the gate of the encampment. The heavy gate carved from gold and jade collapsed under the impact of the tremendous force, and the entire encampment's large array groaned as it twisted and cracked. Wang Wu turned a deaf ear to it and strode forward. Her face showed a bit of anxiety. In front of her, in the hall belonging to Shizhujin, it seemed that something big had happened. Because her perception tentacles could not penetrate it at all, as if the internal situation had been deliberately blocked by someone. Of course, it was natural for Shizhujin's residence to be kept confidential, but it was too exaggerated to keep it secret to this extent. Wang Wu speculated based on the information fed back by her primordial spirit. In the hall, there was at least one supreme-level master who was trying his best to block the outside world's detection. Shizhujin had no reason to do this kind of thing. For him, the rational choice was to disclose his handling process to show his innocence, so as not to be implicated by Luo Xiao. And the fact that the door was locked was too abnormal. The situation was urgent. Wang Wu could not care too much. She took 2 steps forward, drew the power of the earth under her feet, and forcibly broke the last door in front of her in an unprecedented domineering manner. Then she stopped and looked at the scene in front of her in disbelief. In the hall, dozens of female cultivators were rolling naked with Shizhujin. Their white and soft bodies were dazzling. "Oh great, Supreme is so great, so hot, so hard. Supreme, give it to me, I also want it." Listening to the constant obscenities in her ears, Wang Wu felt that her brain had completely stopped working. While Wang Wu was shocked, Shizhujin was also a bit surprised. He straightened up from his pink buttocks and asked with a frown, "Taoist Master Nanfei's, what are you doing here?" Wang Wu swallowed her saliva, adjusted her mood, and then flew into a rage. "I want to ask you, what are you doing?" Shizhujin snorted coldly, "You can't even see this? Of course I'm reproducing." "Fan, are you sick? Do you still want to reproduce at this time? And with dozens of people?" Shizhujin said, "It's at this time that I have to seize the opportunity to reproduce. Otherwise, when I'm in a desperate situation, wouldn't it be a pity if I can't leave enough descendants? I'm now the first target of the fallen immortals. I'm in danger, so I have to seize all the time to reproduce. Well, if there's nothing else, you can go out now." Wang Wu really wanted to stab this damn reproduction maniac to death with her sword. "Where's Luo Xiao?" Shizhujin was quite impatient. "Of course I can't find him. Otherwise, why do you think I'm in such a hurry to reproduce? It's because things are out of control." As he said that, he had already picked up a female cultivator who was in a daze, separated her legs, and then straightened up and quickly plowed. Unlike the female cultivator who had climaxes one after another, Shizhujin's expression looked extremely solemn and serious. It couldn't be seen that he was flirting with clouds and rain at all. It was more like a terminally ill patient drafting his will stroke by stroke. "You really treat this as a career?" Wang Wu covered her chest with her hand. For the first time she felt annoyed to the point that she wanted to vomit blood. "Since you're reproducing openly, why did you close the door and window so tightly just now?" Shizhujin angrily said, "I'm not like those yin and yang school bastards. How could you do this kind of thing in front of others? If you have nothing else to do, then get the hell out of here. Close the door when you get the hell out of here." Wang Wu was silent for a long time. Then she put up her middle finger at Shizhujin and left in a huff. Chapter 735. On the way home, Wang Wu constantly reflected on what went wrong with her series of actions. Until the last step, she didn't feel that she had done anything wrong. Although many of the judgments of actions were completely subjective guesses, there was no better way than subjective guesses in the environment at that time. As for Shijojin's godlike performance, it was estimated that even the fallen immortals could not predict it, so it was normal for her not to expect it. But the old guy is really worthy to be a master of reproduction. It's only been a short time, right? How could he summon 40 or 50 female cultivators with the best figure, appearance, and aptitude to sleep together in his house? How the hell did he do that? Wang Wu clenched her fists with jealousy and hatred. It's very simple. That's because I started all this hundreds of years ago. I have contacted hundreds of female cultivators in the union of 10,000 immortals, all of whom are in good shape and appearance, excellent props for reproduction. I made an agreement with them that when I encounter an emergency and need to carry out the final reproduction of my life, I can immediately summon them to my side. In exchange, they will inherit a considerable part of my inheritance. Of course, there are also people who sincerely recognize my idea and are eager to have my children. Shijojin's voice appeared almost silently behind Wang Wu. However, Wang Wu was not too surprised by this. Instead, she showed a smile, turned around and asked, "You are indeed worthy to be a supreme cultivator with actual combat background. You always remain cautious at all times. I thought you have devoted yourself to the way of reproduction, but it seems that Supreme still left a doppelganger outside." Shijojin was a bit puzzled and said, "What doppelganger? Wait a minute, this is not a doppelganger but the real one? Then the one in your house is the doppelganger? No way will you use a doppelganger to do this kind of thing?" Shijojin was even more puzzled and said, "When did I make a doppelganger? I've always been alone." Wang Wu was silent for a while and then asked with even more incredulous eyes, "From the time we just met until now, it's been at most half an incense stick of time. Even before that it's only been. Don't tell me that you've already, with those dozens of women?" Shijojin raised his head proudly. "That's right, I'm done." Wang Wu didn't know what to say anymore. If it was any other cultivator with the king pill, they would have to worry about their safety. After learning such a sensitive secret, there was the possibility of being silenced at any time. Of course, as the number one king pill in 9 regions, she didn't really care about Shijojin. However, after knowing this secret, Wang Wu still felt as if she had eaten a meal at Ethereal Peak's cafeteria. Shijojin was an experienced cultivator after all. One glance was all it took for him to know what was on Wang Wu's mind. He shook his head and revealed a generous and gentle smile like that of an elder. "Taoist Master Non-Phase, it seems that you haven't correctly understood the way of reproduction." Wang Wu thought to herself, "I don't want to understand." However, at this time Shijojin was obviously in a good mood. Reproduction is not the pleasure of fish in water. This is a difficult and righteous mission, which doesn't need to be tempered by boring pleasure and vanity. Especially when my reproduction is on the verge of death, I should cherish my time even more. If I can complete all the procedures in one breath of time, I will never waste more time. Wang Wu wanted to applaud this divine argument. To be able to say that the time was not enough? He was indeed worthy of being an actual combat veteran. However, then she thought of a serious problem. "Are you saying that you don't have much time left?" Shijojin nodded his head seriously. "I'm afraid that's the case." Next, Shijojin began to give a concise explanation. "When I returned to the station, I didn't see Luo Xiao, but he left a letter." Wang Wu immediately asked, "You didn't destroy the letter immediately?" Shijojin was silent for a moment and then shook his head. "Supreme, in any case you are also a person who does great things. How can you be indecisive at such a time?" The suspicion on Luo Xiao was so heavy, what good thing could he leave behind? Of course, it might also be a threatening letter that said your daughter is in my hands. However, rationally speaking, the best way to deal with this kind of threatening letter was to destroy it on the spot. Never negotiate with a madman. It was better to have one's wife and children die than to have one's wife and children die together. Shijojin was also a veteran. How could he not understand this truth? It was nothing more than that he couldn't bear it. He promoted Luo Xiao from Huayan School. Perhaps it was because of Luo Xiao's talent, but after getting along for a period of time, there would always be some feelings. Shijojin's successor disciple was to inherit his mantle and was more likely to take charge of the 4-element sect in the future. In fact, this was much more important than his own children. Shijojin had such high hopes for Luo Xiao, how could he not have feelings for him? And after learning that he had betrayed the fallen immortal, how could his heart not be hurt? Under the pain, it was understandable that he was confused for a while, but the price was too big. Sure enough, Shijojin then said, In that letter, Luo Xiao explained to me in detail the reason for his betrayal, what kind of stage the god of war blood needs, what kind of opponent and why he made that choice. Finally, he said to me that he was sorry but he never regretted it. With that, Shizhou raised his hand and said, after reading the letter spontaneously ignited and turned into a cloud of smoke. I didn't think too much about it, but that cloud of smoke stayed in the room a little longer. There has always been a cleaning array in my hall, so the filth will not stay for long, so... Shizhou paused and then said, I think I'm poisoned. Late-stage syphilis? Wang Wu asked helplessly. Shizhou was silent for a long time. For him, who should strive for every minute of time, it was obviously because he had received a great shock. I don't know what kind of poison it is, and I can't even be completely sure whether I'm poisoned or not, but I think that cloud of smoke should not be something useless that he left behind. Wang Wu thought for a moment, then took a deep breath and rearranged everything in her mind again. She was convinced that her previous speculation was not wrong. The fallen immortal did take advantage of the time when she and Shizhou were separated, and the method was very exquisite. They left a highly poisonous letter and took advantage of Shizhou's absent-minded state to make him fall into the trap. This design couldn't be considered inconceivable, but now that he thought about it, the person who designed this trap seemed to have predicted everyone's reaction. This was the truly terrifying part. What was even more terrible was Shizhou's subsequent response. You, in a situation where you knew you were poisoned, you still copulated with dozens, no, possibly hundreds of female cultivators. What kind of offspring do you want to leave behind? Shizhou explained with some dissatisfaction. Of course, I've done a good job with safety measures. Reproduction with enough safety measures? Sounds really awkward. Shizhou sighed and said, I'm a great master of reproduction. Don't you think that when my life is about to end, I'm likely to be in an incomplete state and can't leave a healthy seed? So I also began to prepare for it a long time ago. When I was sure to do the last step, there would be a brief last radiance of the setting sun. You should have felt it at that time, right? Wang Wu thought for a moment. When she first saw For Prime Minister, she really felt that this guy was a dragon and a tiger. She thought that he was going berserk, but unexpectedly, it turned out to be the last radiance of the setting sun. Still immersed in reproduction at the last moment of your life, Supreme, you died a worthy death. But the clue of Luo Xiao is gone just like that? After all, he is your successor. Didn't you leave any useful mark on him? Shizhou said. No, I've always trusted him. Wang Wu really had nothing to say. How could this Supreme, who enjoyed considerable prestige in the Wanxian League, make such a low-level and stupid mistake? Trust? Are you familiar with Luo Xiao? Taoist non-face. Although I don't have long to live, I'm very grateful that you're willing to help me, so... Wang Wu's eyes lit up slightly. Are you going to share your inheritance with me? Shizhou froze for a moment and then said, I want to say that I just carefully reviewed everything since I met Luo Xiao. I think I've caught the clue of the person who tempted him to betray me. Really? Shizhou said, Luo Xiao's betrayal must have been guided by someone. No matter what changes there are in his mind, it's impossible for him to get in touch with the fallen immortals by himself. Someone must have observed all this in secret and then took the initiative to guide Luo Xiao to betray me. Moreover, it happened in the past few months. Because of the previous Luo Xiao, I can be sure that even if he had many problems, at least he would not make such a big mistake. And when I recalled Luo Xiao's movements in the past few months, the only suspicious point was that he had been in contact with a strange person. Strange person? Shizhou said. He said that he was a friend of Huayan School, and that person did exude the aura of Huayan School's method, but I don't remember that there was such a person in Huayan School. Wang Wu froze for a moment and then realized that since Shizhou dug out Luo Xiao from Huayan School, he must have investigated the environment in which he grew up before. With the ability of a supreme, perhaps he could see through Huayan School at a glance. At that time, I thought it was a new disciple of Huayan School, so I didn't think too much about it. But now that I look back, that person clearly has a strange smell. Shizhou said and stretched out his hand. I can't find that person accurately, but I still remember that strange aura. I'll copy that aura to you and you can follow it to find him. Wang Wu thought for a moment. Although he didn't give the final result, it was good to have a direct clue, so she stepped forward to accept Shizhou's gift. However, just as she took a step forward, a great warning sign suddenly came from her heart. The next moment, Shizhou's face suddenly became blurred, and a black cloak covered Wang Wu's head. In an instant, it covered the sky and shrouded her. Chapter 736. Non-phase method has long been famous in 9 regions. It was an impregnable fortress, an impregnable iron wall. No matter how gorgeous the language was, it was not an exaggeration to describe the defensive ability of non-phase method. Although the user was only a king pill level cultivator so far, there had never been a case of non-phase method being directly penetrated. Many people attributed this to Wang Wu being smart enough to never provoke an opponent that she could not afford to provoke. However, in fact, it was not the first time for her to provoke an enemy that was beyond her level. Being able to survive until now could not be explained simply by luck or shrewdness. At least, smart people would not doubt how hard her non-phase sword defense was. Similarly, smart people would never try to attack head-on. Even if it was a supreme level cultivator or a higher level cultivator, if they wanted to deal with Wang Wu, they would have to use some tricks. There was no invincible method in the world. Non-phase method's defensive power was almost absolute, which was based on the sacrifice of almost all other attributes. Therefore, in the face of the incoming dark cloak, Wang Wu instantly realized the other party's means. The dark cloak undoubtedly belonged to a certain Dixian who was famous for his black color. This was not the first time that Wang Wu saw this black cloak. Before that, he had used this cloak several times in the grand competition. The cloak was not a lethal tool, but it could form a closed cage which could shrink and expand freely and was very strong. Once it was closed by the cloak, it could not be broken through by non-phase method alone. Wang Wu did not have her disciple's ability to attack and defend at the same time. Only her defensive ability was unparalleled in the world. Once she was sealed, non-phase method could only protect her from death. However, the complete loss of freedom and the loss of contact with the outside world. This was a typical life worse than death. The dignified Dixian doesn't even have the courage to face me head-on. Instead, he has to go through a lot of trouble to set up this kind of despicable trap. This painstaking effort is worthy of praise. Unfortunately, you think too simply of me. Do you think I don't know my own weakness? Wang Wu took a deep breath, and the king pill in her jade mansion quickly rotated. The output of her true yuan suddenly doubled, and in an instant she propped up her non-phase sword defense. But this time, non-phase sword defense was not her forte. The golden light shield was pushed to more than 300 meters away by her. The surrounding buildings were forcibly crushed, and the smooth flagstone road under their feet was also crushed for more than 1,000 feet. In the next moment, the circular sword defense suddenly elongated like a sharp golden sword that reached the sky. In an instant, it had elongated to over 10,000 feet. Non-phase sword defense was not necessarily circular, and Wang Wu had made a big heart demon oath. Her non-phase method could not hurt people, but it did not mean that it could not hurt things. This transformed version of non-phase sword defense might not be able to hurt Black, but it could undoubtedly penetrate his cloak. This was a battle that didn't need to be fought to the death. As long as Wang Wu could delay the time a little with so many people in the City of Immortals, how could they not deal with Black? Moreover, this time he personally made his move in public. If he couldn't succeed, he could only die for a righteous cause. Of course, Wang Wu didn't mind giving him a push on the road to dying for a righteous cause. However, on the other hand, when the person behind the scenes decided to show up, it was, of course, the time for him to make a thunderous blow. The black cloak suddenly expanded in front of Wang Wu. 300 meters, 3,000 meters, 30,000 meters. In an instant, it seemed that the whole world was filled with this darkness. In contrast, the long and narrow sword defense seemed extremely small. The sudden change caught Wang Wu by surprise. She was slightly stunned and quickly made a change of move. However, the next moment she felt that she had lost contact with the world. Her hasty change of move made the sword defense suddenly stretch to dozens of miles, which was shaped like a spear, but it also completely missed. Until the surrounding was completely dark, Wang Wu still maintained the posture of thrusting with one hand. Looking at the sword defense that stretched for dozens of miles in front of her being swallowed by the darkness, she really couldn't say a word for a long time. Damn it, the preparation is really good. I even used my trump card, but in the end I was still played within the secret room. Wang Wu looked around and determined that she had been banished to a special space that was absolutely dark. It was boundless and empty. Even the air that supported the survival of normal creatures did not exist. Of course, for a Taoist master of King Pill, internal breathing was commonplace, and the King Pill in the Jade Mansion could generate its own true yuan, so there was no need to absorb the surrounding spiritual energy from the outside world. Wang Wu's life was not in danger here. The only problem was that she couldn't get out. The black cloak was undoubtedly an immortal treasure. Moreover, it was an immortal treasure with more power than expected. He had used the cloak several times in the grand competition before, but it was only to create a dark cage with a radius of several miles. Therefore Wang Wu was sure that she would not be trapped. However, in fact, the real use of the cloak was to open a passage and banish people to a closed and dead space. On this point he really hit a good card. Because this was the most effective and decisive move to deal with non-phase method. Wang Wu's non-phase sword defense had never been broken head-on, but it did not mean that she was invincible, nor did it mean that she could not be killed. When a person was completely isolated from the world and could no longer get in touch with the world, for this world he was a dead person. Alas, in the end, it's still information asymmetry. I racked my brains but I still made a wrong move. Sure enough, doing this kind of work that I'm not good at doesn't end well. In the dark confinement space, Wang Wu shook her head helplessly, but she didn't seem too frustrated. I've done what I can do here. What happens next has nothing to do with me. No one can say anything wrong with me. I can just take advantage of it. It's a pity that you got involved. With that, Wang Wu turned around and faced the person behind her. In the darkness, Wang Wu was no longer alone. A strong and beautiful woman appeared behind her with a warm and cheerful smile on her face. Haha, why are you still pretending to be a good person in front of me? The lead martial artist from the distant Song clan of Min province patted Wang Wu's shoulder enthusiastically. The great force released subconsciously made Wang Wu's body burst out with a crisp sound of bone impact. Wang Wu rubbed her shoulder and asked her, Are you ready? Yu Jiu of Song smiled brightly and said, Of course. Seriously, Xiao Wu, I have been waiting for this day for a long time. What about the distant Song clan? Yu Jiu of Song's smile faded a little. I actually lied to you on this issue. I didn't come here after dealing with all the things in the clan. Then, there is no distant Song clan in the world. You? Wang Wu was surprised. You really don't leave any leeway. Our original agreement didn't make things so rigid. But there is no doubt that this result is better for things. Yu Jiu of Song said indifferently, I am a barbarian woman. I should do things bloody and barbaric. After wiping out the distant Song clan, I won't worry about anything anymore. Come on, it's time. Well, since you said so, I won't be unreasonable. Wang Wu shook her head and smiled bitterly. It's a pity that I wanted to take advantage of it. Listening to you, it seems that I won't be able to do so. The other side wants to isolate us from the game. Let them dream on. After Wang Wu finished, she held Yu Yu's hand and looked up. Her eyes seemed to have penetrated the thick darkness. At the same time, in the whirlpool of stars, Tetragon suddenly stopped his pace of hunting. Wang Lu, who was behind him, almost bumped into her. What's wrong? Tetragon looked back in confusion and said, Something seems to have happened in the City of Immortals. Wang Lu sighed and said, There are things happening in the City of Immortals every day, from political struggles to celebrities. Occasionally, some celebrities are made public after they make a slip of the tongue at the wine table. There are thousands of things, big and small. What's new? Tetragon ignored Wang Lu's nonsense, but turned around seriously. His eyes penetrated the vast sea of stars and came to a certain point in the whirlpool of stars. Black has appeared. Wang Lu was surprised. Black? Isn't he blocked by you in the whirlpool of stars like a stray dog? How could he appear in the City of Immortals? I don't know. Tetragon shook his head and said, I'm sure that since he was banished here, he has never had a chance to return to the City of Immortals under my eyes. Then, according to the current actual situation, you've rolled your eyes a lot during this time? Tetragon was silent and said, Go back. Go back? Wang Lu was puzzled by this judgment. Are you sure? First, there was a clone of Tetragon in the City of Immortals, but Black dared to appear in front of the clone, which was simply a provocation. Returning to the City of Immortals at this time was somewhat like walking into a trap. Second, about that kind of harmful poison, could it be that they just let it go? They had just tracked the source of the poison and were ready to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, but now they had to leave everything and return to the City of Immortals? I'm sure. Tetragon said seriously, I also found that kind of poison in the City of Immortals. Damn. Wang Lu could not help but scold, then let's go back, but are you sure the other party will let us go back so calmly? If it were me, I would arrange an opponent that we can't ignore to block in front of us so that we can't go forward or retreat. Before his voice fell, a dragon roar came from the sea of stars. Tetragon looked at Wang Lu with some anger and helplessness. Why did this guy never have a taboo in his mouth? However, as a dignified emperor, he would not care about such a taboo. The next moment, the sea of stars shattered. and a huge black dragon broke the space with its dragon teeth and suddenly attacked from the void. The huge mouth closed and 2 rows of sharp teeth shattered the space. Tetragon pulled Wang Lu back and retreated 100 miles to avoid it. Then, a huge monster appeared in their field of vision. Its 2 dark golden eyes were bloodshot, and its gaze was as cold as a knife, which made people's hair stand on end. Ancestor Dragon? Tetragon was shocked. Ancestor Dragon, the ancestor of thousands of Gisaurus in the tombs of immortals. Chapter 737. The appearance of the ancestral dragon was unexpected to Tetragon. Ancestral dragon, as the name implied, was the ancestor of the tens of thousands of Gisaurus in the group of immortal tombs. In the earliest days, the Dixians subdued the ancestral dragon to multiply these strange creatures into tens of thousands and support the entire group of immortal tombs. The ancestral dragon might not have the most powerful power, but it had a very special significance. If the general Gisaurus were the bricks of the group of immortal tombs, then the ancestral dragon was the pillar. Through blood relationship, an ancestral dragon could be related to many Gisaurus. In other words, the loss of an ancestral dragon was likely to mean the loss of countless Gisaurus. Because of this, when the group of immortal tombs was built, the ancestral dragon became the most important thing. They were hidden extremely well, and the number of people who had the qualification to come into contact with the ancestral dragon could be counted on one's fingers. As far as I know, there are no more than 5 people, and that does not include Black, Wang Lu said. It's easy to explain. He's a traitor, and traitors always know some secrets that they shouldn't know. Yes, but among these 5 people, Baizé is also included. Wang Lu was stunned. Are you going to involve that innocent and pitiful idiot as a scapegoat? Tetragon said. About the ancestral dragon, only a few people knew about it. Even if Black is a traitor and has some unknown means, his access to information is limited. Among these people, the only one who might leak the secret, at present, is Baizé. Wang Lu touched his chin. You mean the black and white double spirits are in cahoots and have long had an impure connection? There's no more reasonable explanation at present. Tetragon shook his head. Well, let's not talk about this. As you said, we've met an opponent that can't be ignored. Let's solve it first. By the way, how much role can you play in this battle? Wang Lu said, I can cheer for you and then witness your brilliant victory. Otherwise, do you expect me, a new Yuanying stage cultivator, to fight the ancestral dragon? Wake up, Senior Tetragon. Tetragon shook his head and couldn't help but laugh. The next moment, his smile disappeared, and he flashed hundreds of miles away with Wang Lu. The black ancestral dragon had already crushed the space where it had originally been. For these living beings who had a large world within their bodies, controlling space was as natural as breathing. Similarly, destroying space was as easy as turning over a hand. Wang Lu wasn't sure if the Dixian Tetragon had the ability to survive the dimensional shattering, but he was sure that he couldn't. So, without needing anyone to say anything, he firmly held onto Tetragon's belt. Tetragon turned his head and was about to say something in amusement when he heard Wang Lu say righteously, You'll be in charge of the vanguard, and I'll come up with a plan. We'll be in cahoots. Ah, you're really interesting. Tetragon laughed heartily and said, Very well, I'll do as you say. Let's see how far you can go. Then the first sentence that Wang Lu said made Tetragon hesitate. If you can do it with ease, I suggest you wait and see first and not rush to make a move. Tetragon asked, Why? Since the meat is delivered to the door, we have to see if it's poisonous, right? Tetragon nodded and said, Very well. The timing of this ancestral dragon's appearance was too coincidental. Obviously, someone deliberately manipulated it. However, could the person behind the scenes not see how strong Tetragon was? She had hunted dozens of Gisaurus in the whirlpool of stars. Although this ancestral dragon was strong, it was by no means the opponent of Tetragon. Combined with the changes in the City of Immortals at this time, Wang Lu felt that instead of treating this ancestral dragon as a stumbling block that prevented them from returning to the City of Immortals, it was better to say that it was pushed out to die. In that case, why would someone deliberately control such a precious card and send it to its death? Ancestral dragon itself was also a kind of Gisaurus, which contained a big world in its body. And in this big world, there might be something important. Of course, the above was just speculation, but it did not prevent Wang Lu from making a relatively cautious choice. Senior Tetragon, with your speed, is it possible to bypass this guy and return to the City of Immortals? Tetragon flashed to avoid the bite of ancestral dragon and replied, If you mean flexibility, I can divide it into 3 parts before it can react. But when it comes to speed, at least in the tombs of immortals, no one can be faster than it. Oh, because of the magical ability of space? So, is there a way to subdue it? It's very difficult. Tetragon looked back and said, "It will be very difficult with you." Wang Lu thought for a moment and said, "Or you can pass it to me so that I can instantly ascend to the highest level so that I won't drag you down. Is this your wisdom as a wolf?" Tetragon said, "I have begun to think about driving you out. Well, since it's not feasible to catch it alive, let's settle for the second best. Wait a minute, this big guy also has that strange poison in his body, right?" Tetragon said, "Moreover, it's the source of the poison, at least one of the sources. Eliminating it can greatly curb the spread of the poison. Of course, it's still difficult to eradicate it, but it's better than letting it live. So, if you can't give a reasonable explanation as soon as possible, I don't think I will waste too much time." While the two of them were talking, Tetragon had completely suppressed the ancestor dragon by relying on her tyrannical strength. She used her immortal spirit power to create a terrifying gravitational field, which firmly pulled the hundreds of miles-long black ancestor dragon, forcing it to curl itself into a ball and roar endlessly in a humiliating posture. Of course, this consumed a lot of energy. If this gravitational field was placed in 9 regions, it could directly crush the headquarters of a middle-rank sect, and any cultivator below deity stage would be crushed into powder in an instant. It was a veritable killer move. Although the tone of Tetragon's words was steady, Wang Lu could feel that her immortal spirit power was already very tight. Wang Lu took a deep breath. Of course, in the whirlpool of stars, this action was more symbolic. "Break the illusion." Tetragon repeated, "Break the illusion?" Wang Lu didn't explain too much. "Use your strongest break the illusion immortal technique to try to remove its camouflage." Tetragon narrowed her eyes and didn't think that the ancestor dragon in front of her had any camouflage. This was one of the 27 ancestor dragons that were set up when the group of immortal tombs was built. It was given the name Star Covering by Luo Shui, and it had a dark sea inside its body. Tetragon was no stranger to it. However, since Wang Lu insisted on it, Tetragon constructed a large-scale immortal technique with immortal spirit in her jade mansion, and then stimulated it with her eyes. A mirror suddenly appeared on top of the ancestor dragon's head, which was bound by gravity. Endless light poured down from the mirror like a waterfall and shone on the ancestor dragon. The imperial mirror broke all the illusions in the world. Boom! The ancestor star covering ancestral dragon's body instantly ignited with a flame, which instantly spread on the surface of the ancestor dragon's body. Tetragon looked at the flame in surprise. It was the break the illusion fire that burned when the camouflage was broken. The burning of the flame meant the destruction of the illusion. Is there really an illusion? Then Tetragon looked at Wang Lu with even more surprised eyes. How do you know? Of course it's a guess. As an ancestor dragon and the source of the strange poison, it should be regarded as an important card. Unexpectedly, it actually came to Tetragon's door to kill it. No matter how he thought about it, there was something wrong with it. The biggest possibility was that the existence of this ancestor dragon was extraordinary. Once it was rashly killed, it might cause irreparable damage to the entire group of immortal tombs. However, Tetragon was not an idiot. How could he not recognize that the ancestor dragon was more important? Therefore, Wang Lu would certainly guess that it was enchanted by an illusion. Perhaps Tetragon couldn't see it because she didn't try her best. After all, no matter how abundant Dixian's immortal spirit was, there was no reason to wantonly squander it. Now it seemed like Wang Lu had guessed it right. When the flame burned out, the true appearance of the ancestor dragon was revealed. Its whole body was still dark, but it was dark red with a hint of gold. Seeing this luster, Senior Gem Emperor's pupils visibly shrank. Full red? Among the 27 ancestor dragons, only the one named Full Red had such a color. And Full Red was indeed different from Zhixing. Zhixing could be killed, but Full Red could not. This was related to the deeper secret of the group of immortal tombs. Well done. Tetragon lightly praised Wang Lu. Initially, it was just a joke to ask her to follow behind him and give him advice. No matter how smart Wang Lu was, could she compare with Tetragon in actual combat experience? Moreover, how much of Tetragon's immortal technique did Wang Lu see? How could he tailor a reasonable tactic for her? Tetragon just wanted to see the level of Wang Lu. Now that she had seen it, it was a pleasant surprise. But now a new problem arose. Since Full Red could not be killed, and it was impossible for them to get rid of the ancestor dragon in the whirlpool of stars. What should they do then? Seriously injure it and then leave it alone? Can you enter its inner world? Wang Lu's suggestion once again surprised Tetragon. You want to enter its body? I suspect that the other party has put something important in its body? Wang Lu said and slightly frowned. She felt that her groundless speculation was somewhat untenable, so she added, it's not wrong to carefully check the composition of the meat that is delivered to the dorg. Very well. Senior Gem Emperor, on the other hand, gave considerable trust to Wang Lu. She slightly opened her mouth and a red light came out from it and fell on her palm. It was a key. I have the keys to the inner world of the 27 ancestor dragons. Tetragon explained, however, trying to open the inner world of a poisoned ancestor dragon means a great risk. Wang Lu thought for a while. I'll just rub outside, I won't go in. Up to you. Then just when Tetragon was about to throw out the red key, Full Red suddenly raised its dragon head high and let out an extremely painful roar. The next moment, countless cracks appeared on the dragon's body that stretched for hundreds of miles. Boom. Amidst the loud noise that shook the galaxy, Zhu Qi's entire body exploded and turned into endless flesh and blood powder. In the middle of the explosion of flesh and blood, a woman in white holding a bamboo longsword laughed wildly. Haha, wanna trap me, dream on? Chapter 738. Wang Lu was shocked again. In the decades that he had known Wang Wu, he had been shocked more than once or twice, but this time he would definitely be ranked in the top 3. To be more specific, it was like knowing that his wife, who had shared the same bed with him for many years, was actually a man, and that she had hundreds of lovers outside, and that she had miraculously given birth to a lion's head after being pregnant for 3 years and 6 months, and all the surprises boiled down to such a question, why are you here? Wang Wu, who broke free from the dark world, was also curious when she saw Wang Lu and Tetragon. Instead of answering, she asked, why are you here? She looked at the two of them and said, are you here for your honeymoon? Wang Lu glanced at Tetragon, wondering if she, an ancient person from 16,000 years ago, could understand the meaning of the word honeymoon. Fortunately, Tetragon didn't seem to understand. Or she was still in the shock of Zhu Qi's explosion and hadn't recovered. Wang Lu didn't know what secrets Zhu Qi had, but it seemed that Zhu Qi's death was really significant, so much so that Tetragon was shocked speechless. But that wasn't the problem now. Why are you here? Wang Lu repeated his question and then asked seriously, are you okay? Wang Wu smiled and said, of course I'm okay. Who do you think I am? Wang Lu frowned, went forward, pulled Wang Wu's wrist and tried to feel her pulse. What? Wang Wu pulled back her hand, not giving Wang Lu a chance to show off. Are you really okay? Wang Lu asked, according to your style, the first thing you should do is to ask me for the high compensation for the work-related injury. Putting on such a heroic posture and saying that you're okay, I always feel like you're out of your mind. You're the one out of your mind. Wang Wu scolded, looked around and then asked Wang Lu, why are you here? Or what the hell is this place? The Tomb of Immortals? Damn, how did I end up in the Tomb of Immortals? Wang Lu took a breath and said, what the hell is going on? What else could be going on? I was tricked in the City of Immortals. Wang Wu shrugged indifferently and said, the other side grasped my characteristic of being good at defense and not offense, so they opened a passage to the claustrophobic space, intending to break my non-phase method. However, after all, I'm a heaven-defying expert, so I crushed the opponent's plot with my masculine power. Wang Lu looked back at Senior Gem Emperor, who was still in a sluggish state, and inwardly said, accurately speaking, you actually crushed something that shouldn't be crushed. But now the important thing is not this. In other words, the other side has dared to openly make a move in the City of Immortals? Wang Lu pondered and said, the progress is faster than expected. Did something happen? With that, Wang Lu looked at Wang Wu with inquiring eyes. During this time he accompanied Tetragon to hunt in the Sea of Stars, so he knew nothing about what happened in the City of Immortals. Thus he could only ask Wang Wu what happened. Wang Wu thought about it and felt that it was too troublesome to describe the changes that happened during this period. Thus she nodded and said, yes. You answer the short answer question as a question of judgment? Do you still want the allowance? There's an allowance? Why didn't you say so earlier? It's not a problem for me to give you a detailed report. Wang Wu beamed with joy and said, I'll tell you everything I know. With my current value, this report is worth 5,000 spirit stones per 1,000 words. Wang Lu said coldly, and then I'll wait for you to write a situation report from zero? Haha, that's just the first in a series of reports. Next, I want to write a group of immortals. I can give you 20% of the royalties. While the master and disciple were talking, Tetragon suddenly intervened and said, Wang Lu, you two go back to the City of Immortals as soon as possible. I want to deal with things here with all my might. Wang Lu listened carefully and immediately grasped the key point. Deal with it with all your might? You mean? Tetragon nodded and said, I want to take back the Avatar in the City of Immortals. That's the most important deterrent weapon in the City of Immortals. You want to take it back, so you want us to go back and take it over as soon as possible? Wang Lu smiled and said, in other words, Senior, you have fully trusted us. Only you. Tetragon said to Wang Lu and then glanced at Wang Wu from the corner of his eyes. Although he didn't say much, the almost overflowing killing intent in his eyes was still chilling. The next moment, Tetragon flashed away. Wang Wu stared at the direction where he went with lingering fear. After a long time she said to Wang Lu, did you see that? She just cast me an affectionate glance. What kind of shining temperament in me attracted her? She was probably shocked by how shameless you are. Wang Lu shook his head and said, although Tetragon didn't say it clearly, I'm afraid it's not a good idea for you to explode that Gisaurus with brute force. Wang Wu scoffed at this and said, what else? Wait for that guy to digest me? If we really want to talk about the responsibility of this matter, it's the responsibility of those Dixian people who can't even take good care of their own pets. Since this Gisaurus is very important, don't let it fall into the hands of the enemy. It's already very generous of me not to blame them for not taking good care of their own dog. Wang Lu couldn't say anything more. Wang Wu was completely right. From the beginning to the end, she had done nothing wrong, so the responsibility could not be held against her. Therefore, before Tetragon left, although his anger toward Wang Wu was almost overflowing, he didn't take any action. On the contrary, she entrusted the City of Immortals to the two of them. In fact, she entrusted it to Wang Wu. With Wang Lu's current Yuanying stage cultivation base, it was useless in the immortal level war. The only one who could really serve as the main force was the #1 King Pill in 9 regions. Alright, let's go back to the City of Immortals. According to your description, I'm afraid it's already chaotic over there. Wang Wu said, so we have another choice. After the chaos is over, we can go back to clean up the mess. Well, don't stare at me like that, I'm just giving you a reference. Cough. After that, Wang Wu suddenly coughed. Wang Lu's eyes immediately turned to her. Cough. This was a bit rare for a Taoist master of King Pill, moreover, the famous #1 King Pill in 9 regions. Considering that she had just used an unbelievable amount of brute force to forcefully blow up an ancestral dragon. It was indeed a little too unbelievable to say that she was unscathed and unscathed. The #1 King Pill in 9 regions. This title was full of mystery for others, but the relationship between Wang Lu and her was, after all, different. Wang Lu did not deliberately inquire about what she had experienced in the past 150 years, nor did he ask what kind of card she held in her hand. However, as a cultivator of non-phase method, he could roughly judge the limit of Wang Wu's strength. It was no problem for her to be able to preserve herself in the body of a Gisaurus. However, to burst the internal space of a Gisaurus with brute force and crush the Gisaurus, this was far beyond the scope of non-phase method. Even if the version of Wang Wu's non-phase method had been updated, the basic framework was, after all, set. She could not have such a powerful explosive force. To burst the Gisaurus, she must have paid a considerable price. In the face of Wang Lu's hidden concern, Wang Wu waved her hand and said, it's okay, I was just accidentally poisoned. Poisoned? At the same time, in the City of Immortals, a major event that shocked countless people happened. In the central arena of Immortal 1 area, the battle between the Wanxian League and Tetragon began again. So far, Tetragon still maintained her undefeated record. Again and again she beheaded the elite cultivators who represented the Wanxian League. No matter what kind of opponent she faced and what kind of rules she followed, she always won. She won so much that people had nothing to say and even felt despair. All the land under the sky belonged to the king, and all the people on the shore of the land belonged to the king. With this magical ability, although Tetragon seemed to be 1 against 10,000, in fact, her advantage in the arena was much greater than that of the previous Dixian cultivators. So much so that, she didn't even bother to make a move. Relying on her avatar, she suppressed the Wanxian League until they couldn't breathe. Today, the morale of the Wanxian League was getting lower and lower, and more people no longer believed that the Wanxian League could win the final victory. The central arena of Immortal 1 area, which could accommodate millions of spectators, was no longer full. Of course, there were fewer people who were willing to fight with Tetragon. Today, most of the people who appeared were once unknown rookies because they had no burden. Tetragon was merciless, but it was by no means ruthless. Even if they lost, they wouldn't have to worry about their lives. On the other hand, as long as they could show a few shining points in the arena, they were likely to win the favor of the big shots in the immortal cultivation world. This was a deal that was guaranteed to be profitable no matter how one looked at it. However, today in the central arena, it was not a shrewd businessman but a devout cultivator. Zhu Shiyao, a disciple of Lingjian school, is willing to learn from senior swordsmanship. In the center of the arena, the big sister of Spirit Sword sect was as slender as a pine tree. Her wide red and white robe made her feminine figure more slender and beautiful. However, the great sun golden brilliant sword in her hand made her temperament appear incomparably strong. In fact, at this moment, there were very few people who still had the guts to fight with Senior Gem Emperor in front of everyone. Zhu Shiyao's appearance was a great surprise to many people. This was not the previous grand competition. Now there was no limit to the stage. In other words, the tetragon in the arena was the real Dixian level. Except for the most famous supremes in the Wanxian League, who else was qualified to fight with her? Zhu Shiyao might be talented, and her sword spirit root combined with stellar sword was simply unprecedented. However, she was only in the King Pill stage. In front of Dixian she was like an ant. Senior, please enlighten me. With that, Zhu Shiyao pointed the great sun golden brilliant sword at Tetragon. The straight sword blade was like the unshakable fighting intent of a young girl. The next moment, Zhu Shiyao's eyes flickered. She took a step forward and turned her slender wrist. The great sun golden brilliant sword flew out of her hand and turned into a flash of light. This sword move was tricky and exquisite, which made many old monsters of Yuanying and deity stage speechless. Zhu Shiyao really lived up to her reputation as the big sister of Lingjian school. In terms of swordsmanship alone, perhaps no cultivator of the same generation could compare with her. However, in front of Tetragon this sword move was still too immature, and just as people were thinking about how overwhelming Tetragon's victory would be, swish. The great sun golden brilliant sword penetrated Tetragon's body without any hindrance. Tetragon's figure flickered and then with a bang he disappeared without a trace. Zhu Shiyao withdrew her great sun golden brilliant sword in amazement. Her somewhat blurred eyes looked around the arena, but she could not find the trace of her opponent. A moment later she even took out a pair of bulky glasses from her mustard seed bag and clipped it on the bridge of her nose. Apparently she had begun to doubt her eyesight. However, Tetragon had indeed disappeared. At the same time, hundreds of thousands of people in the audience were silent. They watched Zhu Shiyao perform a one-woman show in the arena with their mouths agape and tongue-tied. But the other side was nowhere to be seen. After a long time, someone suddenly raised a question. Does it mean we won? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.